Live. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Nerdy Up North podcast. It's a nerdy podcast, and it's hosted by Northern Nerds. I am one of your hosts with a very loose voice, Sam.
And I'm the other host, Paul, and we are joined by a full house of nerds tonight. We've got some northern nerds, and we've got some Midland nerds, and we've got some southern nerds.
My gosh.
So we've got, like I say, the full breadth of the UK covered this evening. So he doesn't need any introductions. Well, given one, he's not wearing his fluffy dressing gown, so all his fans will be disappointed. Namely, Donna is the marvelous Grant, and hopefully has recovered from his little walk along Hadrian's Wall. He's still broken, are you?
I'm in agony, mate.
Well, we are old now, so we're not youngsters.
No.
We are joined by the beautiful Dan from Bleeding Marvellous. Like I say, it's 2 weeks in a row now, so we're kind of stealing away now.
We've got her.
So it's one of
I'm
us.
I'm like herpes, you can't get rid.
Oh, that's fine. I wouldn't know what that itching sensation was, but yeah.
Me.
It's Dan.
It's me.
Yes, and we have
I'm the problem, it's me.
Bless you. And we've got the lovely Sarah, and she's not on a bouncy bed tonight, so hopefully, like I say, you won't get the travel sickness.
I have a bouncy table.
Yes, a bouncy table.
I'm so sorry.
But but Sarah has the record now. I believe she was on the longest podcast that we did.
You were. That was so long. I couldn't even talk at the end.
God. I loved it though. Thank you for having me back.
Oh, you are so welcome.
I could have talked for a lot longer, on some of them that we spoke about.
It was a
good
talk.
Times we can do an episode on just one season of stuff.
So. Oh, easy.
But yes, and thank you, Sarah, for bringing the cakes to Nerdfest.
Yay.
And kept us. Because we thought they were actually for us to take home, but then she shouted at us to give them all out. So I was running around.
Well, we were like wanting to keep them. We're like, no, these are ours. But yes. They give us the sugar high we needed. We really needed it halfway through the day. So thank you.
And making her podcast debut, the lovely Lauren from the Midlands. Yes, and she is our resident in Nerdy Up North comic book nerd, so she has a very good collection, and she knows a lot of shit about comics.
She knows a lot of shit. She really does. Me and Lauren have been internet friends since about 2014, so this is like the first interaction that we've ever had with each other.
Yes. It's all been like Instagram, Facebook between then. But yeah, I've been mainly into Marvel and stuff for like since I was 7, which is 30 years now. So
I thought everyone was 21. Apparently, like everyone's like youngster these days. But no, it's nice to have someone around our own age as well. So
I just bathe in the blood of toddlers. It's fine.
Oh. So yes, as we always do as well. I know you've just given us a little bit of information, but when you make your debut, we do kind of penalise you a little bit. So tell us a little bit about yourself, there, Lauren.
Okay, yeah, I'm a comic book nerd. That's one thing. I am in Birmingham, which is a wonderful city to be in if you are a bit of a nerd. I've also been playing Dungeons and Dragons since before it was cool. Like not since Satanic Panic uncool, but like still like hiding your books in your bag kind of uncool.
And got that reference in there.
I mean, it is a true crime podcast.
Yes,
very, very, very relevant. So yeah, I've just always been a bit of a nerd. Like always, like grew up watching Thundercats, He-Man and She-Ra, Turtles, that kind of thing, and it just kind of like it never went away. Like one of my first memories is of watching Star Wars: Return of the Jedi. It was probably about 1989. It was Christmas. Because I remember the Christmas tree,
though, wasn't it, when we were watching it? Yeah.
Yeah, and I had the tape because my dad. It was back in the days when you taped off the telly, because that's what you did back in the day.
Definitely.
So I just remember the adverts and having to skip the adverts because it was live TV. We taped it off. So
and long play VHS as well. If you had a long play, you could get more. All the things.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you for
joining us. 3-hour tape
of
Tom and Jerry too.
Yes, because I know we've been trying to get you on the podcast for a while, and it's nice that we've actually been able to do it. So it's great because I know you are a busy lady, and Sunday nights normally you're doing Dungeons and Dragons night as well, isn't it? Or
It used to be the sands of time have shifted, so they're
Ah.
now Friday, but Sundays
Ah.
are good.
So
Sundays
mental
are good.
note.
so yes. So this episode, we are doing a little bit of a part 2. Not many we've done part 2s before, but I think it's been a while since we've touched on this, and I thought it'd be quite an interesting one way as well to get some different perspectives, because I think the last time it was just me, Sam, and Michaela on, and like I'll be honest, I do like a bit of true crime, but I don't immerse myself into it as much as I know probably my wife does. But to get her on the podcast, I'd probably have to like I'll give her like £1,000, and to be honest, it's not worth that. But yeah,
I'll give her it.
yes,
I'll get her on.
we're doing a return of the true crime, and I'll let Sam do a disclaimer first, because these is always going to be a touchy subject when it comes to certain things. Because a lot of people do have thoughts and feelings on the subject, but again, it is probably the most popular medium out there at this moment, or it's been since lockdown. I would say that the big boom happened.
Yeah, but we'll get into it. I'll try and get through the disclaimer, and I apologize well in advance. My cough is obnoxiously awful, so I do apologize. But everything discussed in today's episode is our opinions and our opinions alone. If you'd like to discuss anything from today's episode, please come and join us in the Facebook group where we can have an open discussion. What we won't have is anyone coming for us and telling us our opinions are wrong. We can all agree to disagree in fandom. So let's keep it fun, keep it kind, and keep the toxic behaviour out of nerdism.
Bless her. And that's the voice that's been on the BBC and the Chronicle now.
And the Chronicle.
Yes. We got interviewed by the Chronicle before we knew it was the Chronicle. I just thought it was some pervert.
I knew who it was.
Phone.
This is why I sat the way I sat.
Some bloke walking about with a phone filmed us. I was like, what the fuck's he doing here? But yeah.
Yeah, I knew exactly who he was. This is why I'm like, hello there. Hi, good sir.
See, that's why they keep me away from people. Put him in the corner, the weird guy. But yes, so we are going to be talking about true crime. Now, I know I did touch on it a little bit. There has been, like I say, a massive boom in true crime. It's probably died off a little bit, I would say, in the last 6 months or so. But during lockdown and like the pandemic says, it was like a huge hit where it was basically everywhere. Like all the big ones, like I know, like Tiger King. Like Netflix start doing every special, like I think every like serial killer start releasing the hidden tapes or missing tapes. Like that was everything that came out.
Yeah.
So what do you think, like, do you, like yourselves personally, like why do you think that was the case, that it drew people to this? I know there's always the mysterious and the macabre aspects to it, but we'll go, like I say, I know there's going to be a few of us tonight, so to try and like keep it a little bit organized. So I'll ask Dan first. So Dan, what's your thoughts on that?
I think it's got a lot to do with maybe escapism still, whilst it's very, very real. Like you say, the big boom came around lockdown, came around when everybody was so immersed in that this was just something that you could listen to and still feel, oh yeah, this is real and it's horrible, but it's not this.
Yeah.
So this is good. So I mean, you've had podcasts and YouTube videos that have been going for donkeys up until the pandemic, when they all shot off to stratospheric proportions, where they were getting more listens than they've ever had, because people had time as well.
Yeah.
And that was something we never had the luxury of. I mean, I worked through it, so I didn't really, but
Same here.
yeah. So time was like, when you had a bit of time, you just wanted to switch off and listen to something else that you couldn't identify with, like escapism.
Yeah.
Again, it is what it was. So for me, that's kind of why I got so into it, because it was still very real, but it was still not real in my life.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
You could distance yourself from it, because it's almost like when you see a horror film at the start that says, again, based on true events type thing. It's like, it kind of brings it back to you and think, oh, I could get more interested and type thing, just because it could happen, if that makes sense. But yeah, it's right in what you're saying as well, like the YouTube boom, like for true crime when it says what's that lass's name that everyone goes nuts about? Is it Bailey?
Billy Sarian, yeah.
Yeah, Bailey.
She talks to you like you're her friend.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know whether that's like how everybody else feels, but
No, I do.
Yeah.
you don't feel like just a random viewer. You feel like you're having like a coffee with her kind of thing.
Right.
It feels very personal the way she kind of interacts with her audience, and I think that's massively a part
So
of the
maybe we
appeal.
could learn from that as well, like trying to interact with people more. Like, come with me, have a coffee, have a pint. But yeah, but yeah. What about you, Lauren? Like, what do you, like with you coming in there? What do you like? What drew you to it? I think.
I mean, I absolutely agree with Dan in the fact that it's horrible, but it's not you're horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can kind of almost disconnect from it, and it. I think because to kind of go on with the Bailey Sarian thing, and it's what a lot of the other true crime YouTubers do say. It's like the psychology behind it is like why people do these awful things and what drives people. Because why do people like cannibalism and stuff like that?
You'll start freaking Sammy out now.
The one thing it's the one thing that scares us.
It is. It's horrible, and it's against human nature. But you kind of want to understand why.
Yeah.
Like, why would people do that? Almost. I wouldn't quite go as far to say defend yourself, although being like female presenting, you do have to know how to defend yourself in certain circumstances because that's just what you're trained to do throughout your life.
Yeah.
You know, to stay safe in the streets like after dark at midnight because of all these horrible things that have happened. So it's like a weird mix of like cautionary tales, like fairy tales when you were a kid, and like the big bad wolf.
Yes.
But then the big bad wolf is like the guy in the white van nowadays.
Oh, it was the blue escort when we grew up.
When we were a kid, but yeah.
Red or blue escort, yeah.
But that's an interesting
thing. Dog.
But it's an interesting take because, like, as you said, the female perspective of this is like something that probably me and Grant will never like be able to see the same point of view because we're never going to be in that situation. We're never going to be have that point of view where horribly use it all. Like, there's risk. I think like I still worry when my wife goes out to goes for drinks and she says, I'll get the bus back. I went, if you get the bus back, I'll fucking kill you. You get a taxi to the door. I don't want you walking, even from the bus stop's like a 3-minute walk from there to mine. It doesn't even contemplate. But that's such a horrible way to think as well, that I've got to worry about that type of aspect. But
you
again,
have to.
as you said, like the true crime aspect, it kind of builds on that fear. But and it's interesting as well because like with the female perspective, it's probably and again not to be the right word like sexist here. A lot of people who love true crime are women. It is like like this. I know that like for the males, like I do have an interest. Like back when I was a kid, because it's one of the things. True crime has always been around, but when I used to shit myself was to crime watch. So that was true crime for me back in the day. Used to watch Crime Watch and hear the different stories.
Yeah.
It used to be put alerts and things, but that used to give you like a little bit of an insight. But Sarah, what aspects do you find?
I mean, just going on that, what you were saying about being female, and like a lot of us seem to have the interest in it. Like, it seems to be overwhelmingly female that are more into the true crime than male. It's almost like this isn't something that's like at the forefront of my mind, but thinking on that point in particular, it could be the kind of like, oh well, the victim in this case was female. This happened to her by this route. So maybe I should avoid doing that kind of thing,
right?
To like prepare myself to like get away from
that.
something. Just on that point, that wasn't a me personal thing, but it just made me think about that there. For me personally, it's kind of like it's going back to the morbid fascination thing and the psychological aspect of how a human could feasibly consider or then even perform whatever they did on another human. And you know how it came to it. I mean, a lot of what I like is the detective side of things and how they work it all out to catch the person as well. So I like the puzzle side, working it out bit as well.
Oh,
I
you
think
love
that's
John
been-
Douglas's.
Yeah, I think that's been like the big boot. Like the recent ones has been more showing the police side, good or bad. Like 'cause I know we'll talk about like other type of ones that came out. Like it's interesting to see the police not being shone in like the brightest light, the mistakes they've made, how they've admitted the mistakes, or whether just blindly said no, we were not wrong and stuff like that. It's like
Yeah.
it's like the bullshit politics, but it's interesting to try and get. Because with any type of true crime or with the documentaries, you're only getting one side or getting like the narratives of the person who's making it. So it's basically interesting to get the different points of view, which we are getting now for a lot of them. Because all the times we were getting for a long period was glorifying like the killers for a long time. And again, that true.
And that's something I don't like.
No.
Yes, it's one of them things you can either feel uncomfortable or if it depends how they handle it or go about it type thing. But what about you, Grant? Looking all sturdious and serious.
Looking all serious.
I mean, in relation to my personal journey with true crime, you know, I kind of said it on the serial killers episode that I was on as well. It was getting into heavy metal music in my teens. Initially finding out that Richard Ramirez had claimed that he'd done what he'd done because of Highway to Hell, and I was like,
oh my gosh, yeah.
yeah. And then I obviously listened to the last song on Highway to Hell and thought I actually might have taken that one a little bit too seriously. But then going down the route of stuff like West Memphis 3 and Paradise Lost and those kinds of things, I think in relation to the more recent boom, I understand why it boomed during lockdown, but I think we had the touch paper to this lit a few years beforehand with Making a Murderer. And it gave people kind of a gentle in to true crime because while it was visceral, there was this story of innocence underlying and somebody to root for. So people kind of got guided down a little bit of a route into true crime as far as the broader media is concerned. And then during lockdown, nothing fictional was coming out. So everybody that wanted a horror fix, everybody that wanted a little bit of fear putting into them went to the stories that had happened in real life because there was no fiction being released to scare us. Kind of intrigue, for not entertainment, but I suppose some people did do it to supplement their entertainment. You know, some people do like that stuff for that reason. I don't thoroughly understand that point of view, but there are people that just go there.
Yeah.
So.
No, definitely, and and that's as Sarah said, it's all about the human psyche as well. Like it's the curiosity in seeing what pushes a person or what steps in the person's life did they take to where they thought this was okay or like, and it is interesting to know, but it's like how far do you push that curiosity where it borders on like
sleuth
glorifying type thing, or as you said, Sam, like I know when we did the last podcast where we talked about like the sleuthing side of it, where the cause, like in certain cases now with the internet being the way it is, causing like say a lot of trouble. And a good point to move on to, because like say I did watch a recent one this week just because I thought I'll catch up on a few of the big ones that came out, because I know Netflix have just released the bombing one in
Boston Marathon.
Boston Marathon bombers.
Yeah.
Like that was an interest because it was purely all about the investigation and the police part of it, and showing how the different arguments between police forces, like on releasing information, and how like they were just like overruling each other, and like it was all for political points more than anything else than to actually move the investigation forward. But the sleuthing side, what I thought was quite interesting, because they opened up not just like phone lines but email lines where they would get people asking to send photos or videos of the information in, and the amount of photoshopped things that people were sending in with like bags in different areas, like Asian people photoshopped in because they would like say they wanted the narrative that it was Al Qaeda. So like all these like bigoted or racist people in America, I know you get them all up around the world, but America, like fuck yeah, like where like not no one's gonna mess with us.
America.
Yeah.
Like the amount of level that the sleuths were going into, like pinning them on random people, posting their photos on people just because the color of the skin was their pictures were getting plastered all over the internet, and they were getting harassed because of some local or not even local idiots. There's people on the internet thinking I can see something that someone else doesn't, and not letting the investigation. So it probably slowed down the investigation by so long.
It's ridiculous how sleuths get away with it, and it's just as recently as the lady who went missing in the water, Nicola. You can't think of her
Nicola
name.
Bulley.
Yes, her.
Yeah.
The amount of people who went on investigating absolutely nothing, like nothing.
So horrible.
This poor woman went missing. It was put into the news because she went missing. The police fucked up majorly on that one, massively. But then these fucking TikTokers decided to go down to her village where these people are trying to actually find this woman and start pull shit up of that just no relevance, bringing absolutely nothing to the table and causing her family nothing but grief. The fucking disgusting people. I am all about liking true crime, however way you want to look at it, getting invested yourself into these cases, but not to publicly go out there and say, well, I can solve it because I'm fucking hate them.
You know why that is, though? You know why that is? Don't fuck with cats.
Right.
That has
I'll watch it.
That has got so much to do with the way that people think that they can solve anything. I mean, I give my dues to the two main people. Their names escape me now, but they kept it under wraps. It wasn't for social glory. It was because they genuinely wanted to work this puzzle out and find him. And they were behind the scenes for years or however long it took them. I think it was about 1.5 years maybe to find this guy, work out who he was, find out what he did. They were the kind of people that if I go missing, I want them looking for me. You know?
I totally get that.
But they did it in such a way that Netflix took their story and made it like a glorification thing.
Right.
So you've got all your TikTokers, like you say, and your YouTubers that like to go to the grave sites and the murder sites and the all that stuff. And then they try and make it that they can do the same thing because they've seen it on telly. And it's like...
They aren't doing it for the right reasons. They're doing it for the clout.
It's
to look good. They aren't doing it to help the victims or the families. They're just doing it for likes.
It's views. It's just views because especially on TikTok now, your viewage can get you money. It's simple as just having people view your video. So if you're getting more more views, you're actually getting paid for that. I think Michelle McNamara, who did her book, I'll Be Gone in the Dark. It was oh, good God, someone help me out with his name. My memory is shocking tonight. Golden State Killer. Yes. Michelle McNamara was incredible, exactly the same. She did everything with police cooperation. She worked with them. She was documenting it. Yes, it was going to come into a book and articles were being written, but it wasn't a case of pointing fingers. It wasn't a case of saying, it is this person, I believe it's this person. It was just traces and trying to track people's memories.
And
it
honestly,
was trying
sometimes the police do need that help, especially with cold cases. Cold cases might just sit on shelves for years. And sometimes with the right investigation, like the right journalist or researcher, that can really help a case.
Yeah, I think Michelle did it justice in that case, and it's just I think I talked about Michelle on the last one because it's just it's so sad. It's so sad she never found out the courtroom. Literally, she passed away a year before or something. It was on the book tour because I think Patton Oswalt finished that book, and they were on the book tour and on the documentary, which is fantastic, by the way. You really should watch it. That is such a brilliant piece of documentary making. He finds out on the book tour that he's been caught, and it's such a moment. But yeah, Michelle's mint.
So when it comes to the actual true crime stories as well, I know there's, as we've touched on, there's so many different aspects or different variations now. There's, like say, the old school like BBC, or even if you go on Sky now, there's dedicated crime channels to different things as well. There's the Netflix ones that like cover like the big stories or the big events as well. Which ones is it like you personally like feel connections, or not connections to, that's the wrong word, sorry,
No, I get that. I get what you mean by that.
Is it like the big stories, or is it the big ones, or is it like the ones that are more closer to home? So
definitely not closer to home. Fuck that. That's too scary. That's too real.
Yeah.
Let the more Americans. I don't mind kicking this one off if you don't mind, because mine was West Memphis 3 is obviously, and I mentioned that in the last one that I watched, and I'm happy to talk about it again because I was involved in that in the late 90s. So it's been with us for a long time. Manson Murders is always a big one. But at the moment, and I don't know why, don't understand it, and I hope somebody can kind of help us try and answer it. But Chris Watts, fucker, I have been down such a rabbit hole with him.
Don't do that.
I don't understand why though, Dan, because it's so cut and clear what he did, but it's because how cut and clear it's like, is there more to it?
It's one man's obsession with his new partner.
Is one man's obsession with himself, is what I got.
Yeah, himself. But he was so, I think he wanted this perfect life with this new woman, and he was prepared to cut everything out. And at some point in psychology, I don't know whether you class him as a sociopath, a narcissistic tendencies, or all of the above.
All of the above, yeah.
But he literally just chopped that part of his brain and went, right, this is going to happen. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people can compartmentalize. There we go. A lot of people can do that. I mean, to an extent I can, but I'm not talking about like burying a body in the back garden and then forgetting about it, you know. But for me, the wife, okay, but she was pregnant, so not okay. But you know what
okay.
I mean? Wrap your head around a wife.
That's what I got about it. I was like,
as well. It's like
it's the kids. So I can understand the night she came home, they get into it, shit happens, accidents happen, he kills her. He then has this moment.
I'm not getting an argument with Sam.
I think he talked to my husband about that. We had this same conversation earlier today. But then he has this period of time to calm his shit down. And he sits for 45 minutes in that car with them two little girls, knowing exactly what he's going to do. That is the part I can't get my head around. I can understand to a degree fits of rage with the wife. Like I can kind of get that. Yeah. It's that 45-minute drive to the drop zone, and them kids are still alive.
That's exactly when it stops becoming any kind of accident. Like as soon as you're moving a body, or you're going like, oh, I'm going to kill the kids now as well.
Yeah.
Then it completely stops being like a fit of wild anger or whatever, which is still completely inexcusable. But it's that moment when it's like, oh, I'm just going to kill. Because this happens a lot with like, it mainly seems to be like, I'm sure women have done it too, but where a partner snaps, kills their spouse, and it's like, oh, I might as well kill the kids because they can't live without their parent.
Well, Edmund Kemper did that to his grandmother because he couldn't bear his grandmother witnessing, but I totally get what you mean. Like,
it's just like that's messed up.
And also it's not over. He is still heavily in the news. He's looking for I don't know if he's looking for some form of another trial or something like that. His fucking parents are disgusting. Absolutely no regard for them children whatsoever. They can have their feelings on her, but they have no regard for them children and the fact that they are gone. All they are concerned about is him. And it's also being brought into question the mistress.
Right.
She is now being brought into the fold. Whether or not they can do anything, or I don't know, but there's been questions around her now because fuck me, was she sketchy as anything? You have a funny feeling she knew what was going on.
Don't get me wrong, infidelity is one thing, right? If you choose that that's the path you want to take,
fucking divorce, man.
Exactly. But
Mhm.
obviously some people don't. And she must have known. I mean, there's a degree of factors in this where you can say, well, he never told me. He told me they were separated, blah, blah, blah. I get that. You can be, you can be force fed all these lies and stuff like that. But the deeper you dig into her, the more she must have known something was up with him. I'm not saying she knew what his plans were, but
you get the gut feelings every now and then, don't you?
Absolutely. There's something about her as well. They say a good liar will be able to tell you their side of the story from start to finish, without it ever changing. Whereas someone who's telling the truth will struggle to be able to tell you factual things from start to finish, because the memory doesn't work that way. It doesn't go from A to B. It can change things. Times can change, places can change, faces can change, but a liar can tell you from start to finish exactly what their plan is, and she did that throughout her whole fucking interviews. Never changed.
Because it's a script. It's a script in like their/her head. Like
the lines.
It's rehearsed. It's like same as giving, a soliloquy from Hamlet. You rehearse it, you know it.
Yeah. So Chris Watts, I went down. I couldn't even tell you why. I've just gone down so many massive rabbit holes with him. I find it so fascinating, but I am finding more fascinating the side of people who are willing to tell you why they did it. So we all wonder why. Wow, God, how do we get into the mind of these people? How do we break them down? But there's actually a few people who will actually tell you why they did it, and they would do it again. And I'm getting more fascinated in them. I never used to. I used to find them quite boring, because it's like, what fun is that, trying to figure them out? But listening to the likes of Edmund Kemper and Dennis Nielsen, God, even fucking Dennis Rader, who honestly, out of all the serial killers, he's the fucking worst. But yeah, I'm starting to be fascinated with the people who are willing to actually tell you why.
Have you watched I Am a Killer, Sammy?
No. Which one's that one? Is that about Dennis Rader?
No, it's a Netflix one. It's one of the series ones where, like, every week they interview a killer in prison.
Right.
So
I think I've seen it advertised.
It does go into that kind of side of things.
Oh, cool. I might give that a watch, because it's honestly, that is.
I think there's about 4 seasons now.
That is really fascinating for me, as to there's people actually willing to talk as to why.
I've seen a couple of apps. It's interesting because it's very different people as well. It's not just like
they do swing wildly. Like some are like, I admit I did it, I regret it. This is what happened. Some are like, no, I'd do it again, type of thing. But it was an accident.
I did it, and I'll do it again.
And there's ones that, you let me out of here, I'd do it again right now.
Oh God, that's Edmund Kemper. That honestly, that man terrifies me more than anything in the world. But he is just so fucking fascinating, just to listen to him openly talk about his whole life. He holds nothing back. Well,
he does audiobooks now, doesn't he? He does voice over.
Oh my God, I did not know that.
Yeah. He reads them in prison. They record him and then they sell the audiobooks. So you could have listened to Edmund Kemper at some point reading an audiobook and you wouldn't have known.
Is that ethical?
He has a
like,
very distinct voice.
I don't know whether it goes into his commissary and he can use it that way, but
as long as it's not, as long as it's not connected to his crimes, then yes, because the Son of Sam law states that you can't profit off your own crime. So
as long as like reading Harry Potter or something.
It's stuff like that. Yeah, it's stuff that's not it's not non-fiction, it's all fictional that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
But
that's crazy.
Mental.
I am gonna look that up though now, strangely out.
Yeah.
He's got such a voice. Like, he can totally draw you in. I think that's what John Douglas said more about him. He's just so he can just draw you in, and to the point where he actually, I think he said to John Douglas, and I'm sure this is in Mindhunter as well, they use this in Mindhunter, where he's like, I could literally get up here and snap your neck.
Yeah.
And I would think nothing of it. And he got so close, he scared the shit out of him. He had to back away from him. But he just laughed it off and went, but I'm not going to. Like, I'm not going to do it.
He was a monster, man. I think, similar to what Sarah was saying, there's a show on Netflix, and I can't stand the man. I think he shouldn't be given the airtime to do anything but for his due. there is a show called like Women That Kill, and it's got Pierce Morgan.
Yes, I've watched that.
He's the only reason I haven't watched that one because I can't stand Pierce Morgan.
But it's the only thing where his type of line of question kind of works, though.
He does,
because
he's very good. He's very put aside how you feel, because I'm exactly the same when it comes to Piers Morgan, but that man is a good fucking interviewer. Like he asks the right questions, and he keeps a tone you're not used to or familiar with. He's a very different person when he's doing them types of work. When he does that type
kind of like
work.
a Louis Theroux type situation where Louis kind of like engages with them and brings them like in a false sense of security before he starts unleashing like the harsh questions in Louis Theroux, say, where Pierce Morgan, it's like talking to him, asking them to tell them stories, and then when they say something that's not quite right, he calls them on it, and it's like, because you can tell when people are just filling you with bullshit. It's like, oh yeah, we didn't plan to kill him. He's well, why the fuck did you take a gun? Oh, it was just out of protection. But why did you need protection? It just did. And it's like very direct, and like I don't think these prisoners, because they're all American, so they're all female American prisoners, so that they've never been probably talked to like hostility, like interview, because they're always like trying, I think they want to get the story, so that's kind of nicey, and he
let's play a nice little talk.
And there's few people that's actually walked out of him, like saying I'm not talking to him anymore, but he's never abrasive or Pierce Morgan-esque. It's just like, as you said, he tries to get to the story, and that's probably where Pierce Morgan was a good journalist, but he just become a I can say a prick, to be honest, put it in the nice way. But that was always an interesting one. But what about you, Grant? Like, I know you like a bit of the dark side, shall we say? So, what kind of element draws you into it? And if you start like saying helter skelter, I'm starting to start getting worried.
That's what you should have done, Grant. You should have wrote it on the back, on red. Well, it wasn't helter skelter. It was helter skelter, because they couldn't spell.
I really thought for a second there when he stood up, he was going to say, "Well, Letitia."
Sorry, Grant.
The T-shirt is actually a replica of the one that they sold at Ted Bundy's execution outside when they were celebrating. It's the Burn Bundy Burn T-shirt.
Burn Bundy Burn.
I mean, the one that sent me was always Paradise Lost. It was the West Memphis 3. You know, that documentary in itself is, you know, the opening sequence is one of the most difficult watches of cinema that I've ever fucking witnessed. It's harrowing. But I've always, much the same as what Sammy's just said that she's getting into, I've always been interested in the people that were left to talk. I've always been fascinated by the psychology of what put these people in that mindset and the justifications for them to come out of it. I think it's because, like I said, Richard Ramirez with AC/DC, I just went, hold on, he got that from Whole Lot of Rosie? Yeah. Like, really? What the fuck kind of crack was he smoking? A lot of it, apparently.
A lot.
So yeah, like the cold casey kind of stuff and what have you is the one that's relatively new to me. Stuff like the TV shows that you've been talking about and what have you, you know, My Lover, My Killer, and all of this kind of thing is something that I'm just becoming accustomed to with it. I like the classics, if you will.
Yeah, I'm a classic girl too.
So what kind of classics?
Oh, sorry. I thought my headphones went off there for a second. I was like, oh, not again.
Well, like I say, the people that are kind of still alive to be able to tell it. So, you know, trying to work my way, your way, whatever you might call it, through the minds of somebody like, I mean, Bundy's obviously not here now, but he lived for long enough before he was executed for them to start picking his brains to bits and what have you. And just, like I say, going down the psychology holes and trying to work out what made them what they are. I've always quite happily debated the concept between, are you born evil or are you wired up that way during childhood? And I think the concept of whether you're born something or whether you're wired up that way is a lot broader than just the urge to kill.
Nurture, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's always been that wonder as to what point did it, you know, at what point did Dharma suddenly go, you know what I'm going to do? Black and Decker advert or whatever it might be. You know,
Drill
at
looks
what point,
interesting.
you know, at what point did Bundy's brain just go and he became what he was? And you know, obviously with people like Manson, there's, you know, a pretty cut and paste route into the trauma and the narcissism that went with being a cult leader. But some of them, it's not quite as simple as that, and that's the bit that's fascinated me. Like I say, the colder case stuff, with the exception of Paradise Lost, which I supported because I was a metal fan. And this was presented in front of me, and it was a massive miscarriage of injustice. I've actually just given my West Memphis 3 original support T-shirt to my daughter a couple of months back.
I used to have the bracelet. You remember the rubber bracelets?
Yeah.
I used to have one of them from like back in the late, because it was the late 90s, and I have no idea where it is. I pledged my money.
No,
I had the famous free, the West Memphis free T-shirt.
So cool.
That was a legit one from the campaign, and followed that throughout. And then, yeah, that's me.
No, it's an interesting one as well about the instance between nurture versus nature type thing, because I think, like, again, not to like say I'm a psychologist and stuff, I think a lot of these will have, like, say, an addictive personality, shall we say, and it's one of them things, you know, when you get addicted to something. I'm not saying like you go off and start killing and doing the things to do. So when I think it's like going over that line, you need to push that line again. So it's similar, like, say, with when I started like this project. I'm not going to say the cult's going to start turning out like Manson, but it started off like saying,
is it not?
How many people can I get to join? We'll write articles, then it become a podcast. Then it's like, what's the next thing? You're trying to push to the next level, and that's my kind of like addiction to it type thing, where these people, they've just got not different urges, but it's kind of like, well, definitely different urges, sorry. It's basically how far they can push their threshold. Like my threshold, I can't even hurt it. Like I'll take a spider outside, so I'm soft as glass. Where it's like that type of element that kind of triggers, or that I, not say relate, because I'm not trying not to come across as a bit of a psychopath at all. But I can understand.
Well, I took the psychopath
too.
I took the psychopath test,
Yeah,
and I only failed because of the animal part. That's the worry inside of it. I literally only failed because of the animal part. There's something wrong with me. My husband discovered that today.
Well, going back to what Grant said, there is actually a common thread when you start going into the nature versus nurture side of it. They're finding more and more that I call them the big lot, you know, the famous ones, the top
tier.
The common thread through those guys is that at some point they had a head injury as a child.
Right.
They ended up in hospital due to beatings from family or from bullies, or they fell out of trees, or they got hit by cars. And there's this common thread that goes through, that they have some knock on the bonds, which then makes them go whoop, whoop. And they're not saying that everybody that gets hit on the head as a child is going to be a murderer, but it's an underlining common thread that seems to be reoccurring more and more now when they go back into their in their history. And
it's brain injury on top of trauma.
Yeah,
that's the common thread. It was the same with, but Bundy annoys us because there's like, you don't know when it comes to him what's true and what's factual. The fucker just liked to talk. Whoever he was talking to, he suited the conversation to them. If you've ever heard the interviews where he did it with the priest, and they were trying to say, "Oh, we're blaming it on sex. He was sex mad. He was sex crazy," but he's just sitting there going, "Yes, I was." He fucking wasn't. He was such a liar.
Well, but he was
Son
of Sam as well. Like, say,
David
blaming on the
Berkowitz.
fucking dog talking to him. Then he's like, just thought.
The son of Sam. Oh, David. Oh, he's just so creepy, man. I still think there's something more to that than I can't think that David Berkowitz did all that. Like, I really can't. I think there's so much more to that.
He had to have some kind of help.
Absolutely.
He was
even just the timings of where he was versus the police car that was like really close to him one night. There was no feasible way he could make it from one point to another. So
look at him.
But
I'm a big fan of there being somebody else involved in that case.
And the only issue
was dumb enough to be the fall guy, though. Like
what?
he was dumb enough to be like the fall guy and take the rap for everything.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
right, I got you. What were you going to say, Dan?
I was going to say, the minute you only show signs of some form of psychosis by saying a dog's talk to you,
Yeah.
that's your only bit of complete, absolute craziness in the whole scheme of things. That's the one thing that you're resting your whole case on. And then when now he's found God, so he's okay. He's in, he's repented his sins, and David Berkowitz swears he never did it, or he's saying he did it for all the different reasons, like they do. They go in that weird circle of, they know they're in there for the rest of their life. They're not getting out, and 9 times out of 10, they'll never see death row, even though they're on death row. And they find God, then they repent, then they say, well, I didn't do it, and then they have, oh, I did it, but I have my reasons, and then, oh, I didn't do it, and they go through this whole.
Just don't think he's clever enough.
No,
I really don't.
It was big scale.
It was massive, and I don't think he's clever enough to orchestrate what actually happened. He's just no. Sorry, David, but no.
To be fair though, what was it? It was the 70s though, wasn't it? So the police force and everything wasn't really up to scratch, shall we say, back then. So
New York was quite a different place then as well. Like,
New York was fucking
incredibly violent in like the 70s and the 80s. It was like a war zone basically. So
yeah. You, to be honest, at that point, you don't really know who you're fighting for, because New York was terrible. But fuck David.
not literally, but we're not started talking about that thing.
We're not
someone in the
that.
chat talking about writing letters to prisoners and stuff. I've never thought about doing that. I don't know if any of you guys have thought about it.
Fuck no.
No,
that's so weird.
So back in college, like I was kind of casually part of like, some of my friends joined the Amnesty International group, and one of the things at Christmas time was they sent Christmas cards to prisoners.
All right.
Nope.
Which I don't know who they sent them to, kind of thing, but it's one of those kind of things where it's just like,
it's a choice, basically.
Yeah, it was a choice.
Yeah.
I guess there was like some kind of list you could pick your prisoner from, but
they did used to have like a book.
Yeah.
Like a book of people who you could, and you got their number. You didn't necessarily know exactly what they did, but you saw who they were, and you could like literally write to them. It's these women who get fascinated.
There's a difference between giving somebody some kind of like lifeline of like being a better person and being a weird fan girl / boy over it. Like it's when.
Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say it's like some people would like get obsessed and want to marry him. It's just like,
well, that was the point I was leading to, was the whole Bundy thing. They were fucking dyeing their hair to match his victim choices. Like, way, man.
People were throwing themselves at Jeffrey Dahmer, and it's like, honey,
he was definitely not interested in you.
Yeah, no,
you are not his type.
What about you, Dan? Like, say, like what ones like draw you in type thing?
I'm not biased. I like them all. Purely because everything is so different. Copycat killers fascinate me because they're just doing it for the clout, like you said. There's this element of that. Was it him? Was it me? You'll never know. But guess what? It was me. Yeah. But yeah, I like the ones that are. Oh God, this is going to sound awful. I like them. I don't like that. It's the terminology.
Fascinated?
Yeah,
you can't go right. You can't go right with terminology in true crime.
It's the famous people, like the true crime to do with famous people, and I'm not talking about serial killers, that kind of fame. I'm talking about famous people who have got involved in some way or another, and it just cascaded from there. Because I mean, going back to Manson, the fascinating thing for me about the Manson case was he actually went and lived with one of the Beach Boys for a year, for an entire year. And he wanted to be on one of the albums. He actually is credited. Well, he's not credited on the album.
He's on the B-side. He's on the B-side of one of them.
What the fuck?
Yeah, well, that's where he was. That's where he was going to. The property at Cecilia Drive. Drive. That Terry Melcher. That's where he was going to. And when it turned out that it was Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski, he was like, yeah, fuck it. Like, it was Tex Watson's decision to do that, to go there. It was just Manson who pointed them in the direction.
But it's like the case that I'd sort of put a bit together about today was actually this one. I don't know if people know about the murder of Dominique Dunne.
I do.
It's so tragic because at every point along the way, it could have been avoided.
Could have been avoided.
She was
so sad.
She was only 22 when she died.
In 83.
November 1982. John Sweeney, her boyfriend, who had a long history of domestic violence against her, strangled her for 5 minutes in the front garden after she had kicked him out about a month before. And she didn't die. She was legally declared brain dead for 5 days, but she died of her injuries, basically. And the amount of fuckery. Do you remember that case a while back with that lad that raped that girl, and he was a champion swimmer, so the judge went easy. It was very similar to that in the respect of how the judge treated John Sweeney because he had a future.
He was a promising chef.
Yeah, and he worked under Wolfgang Puck, so he must have had, he must be good, and all this sort of stuff. And it was like they had history. And they had statements from his previous girlfriend where he beat her so badly, her eye socket was gone. And he wouldn't let her testify in the case because he said it would make the jury prejudicial against him. And it's like, well, that's the bloody point.
Yeah,
to show that, but in the end, they reduced it to.
You got 2.5, yeah.
Yeah, you got 2.5 years.
And then
voluntary manslaughter.
Yeah. And it was premeditated. Fuck what the jury said. It was completely. He knew what he was doing when he went there.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of cases leading up to that point from family and friends that have witnessed all the abuse over the years prior to that, and the saddest case was she was supposed to be in an episode of Hill Street Blues. She was. She was
in the episode.
She turned up to the set and she had been beaten black and blue by him the night before. This is all rumor or jungle drama.
Oh no, her dad confirmed this. I read her dad's he did like a full
Vanity Fair.
Fuck me, Dan, if you've read it, it's harrowing to listen to it, but that is 100% true, that story.
Well, she turned up anyway to the set and she was beaten black and blue, and the special effects people went, we don't have to do anything with you because this is what you need to look like for this scene. Off you go. And they actually showed it in one of the documentaries I watched for this, and
she was a state. She was an absolute state.
And the worst thing for her parents was that episode was released somewhere about between 3 to 6 months after she died.
Wow.
Yeah.
And they had to see their daughter in that state. And they I mean, I understand why they did it, but they dedicated the episode to her memory. And it's like, fuck.
It's so bad taste. But that article he wrote was just tremendous amount of strength from, like, you can feel the anger throughout every word he's writing. He made that guy's life live in hell.
He did. Dominic Dunne, and the judge.
Dominic Dunne went out of his fucking way to make sure everybody knew what he did.
It was the flyers.
He used to hang posters up. Yeah, he used to put posters everywhere saying, "Do you know this man's a murderer? You're eating the food of a man who's murdered my daughter." Her brother is actually Griffin Dunne, who is in American Werewolf.
It's Jack. Yeah.
Dominic Dunne hits a chord. Another one, Hollywood style, Rebecca Schaeffer. That's another one that kind of hits her because that was again completely avoidable. I'm sure she'd even I don't know if she'd, because this is where stalking laws came in. Is because of Rebecca Schaeffer.
She got shot on her doorstep, didn't she?
She did.
She was stalked and then shot. But I did one of these tours when I was in LA, and it was it's called the Deathly Departed tour.
It's Dearly Departed, and it's Michael Scott. I fucking love him. He's gone now, though. He's left LA.
I've got many a thing to tell you about that, but I can't say it online.
Okay.
He is. I've done it 3 times, and we've been to the actual. They take you to the cemetery where Dominique and Heather O'Rourke are actually buried.
Yeah.
And you do a little walk around. And the weirdest thing is when you go in, they give you a map and go, oh, there's Betty Page, there's Marilyn Monroe, there's Hef, you know, and you wouldn't know this cemetery is in the middle of, it's like no bigger than a car park.
Mm-hmm.
And it's high-rise buildings, office blocks all around it. And it is, you would never know in a million years these people are there. And that tour is fucking bizarre.
Yeah,
it's been 3 times.
Well, I've been with different people every time, and they're like, "Oh, that sounds good. Let's go on that." So I'm like, "Okay."
He's gone now. He's closed shop. He's moved back to where I can't remember where he's from, but yeah, he's gone now. The whole tour's gone.
He used to date Graham Norton.
He did. He very much did for a very long time.
Well, let's be honest.
But he's when you watch American true crime stuff about Hollywood, guarantee his face is going to be there. He has a collection that just boggles the mind.
He does.
Massive.
He had a museum out the back, and I went out and I had a look at some of the stuff he's got because he got so giddy. He was like, "You must come and see it for free." And I was like, "Okie dokie." So off we went, and he had Jane Mansfield's car.
He had the car, yeah.
And he was so fascinated. He got the black light out and he was showing me all the blood splatter that was still on the car. You know, and
he collects death certificates, like either copies or actual ones.
Beyond
it's going to the extreme. Oh, that is like
that's where my comfort levels would be like. Okay.
This is I like some of his stuff that he talks about because he does talk about cases that I don't know. Like I had no idea that Patsy Cline died in a plane accident. I do now because of his YouTube channel. But the one bit that got us and kind of give us the ick was when he purchased the door that Divine fell onto when he died.
Yeah, it was in the museum.
That door. Mm-hmm. My God, that just he had something about it.
He had a lot of things that were very peculiar. Like he had a tooth that was allegedly belonged to Tex that they found in the ranch, and it could have been anyone's, but like
it probably any because how many people lived on the ranch,
and it's like he had lunch boxes that were found on the ranch, and
he's obsessed with it.
He because he did the Helter Skelter tour, which I never went on, but he did do it, and the one thing I will say about him is if any of you guys do get a chance to watch any of his videos, his knowledge, like you say, Sammy, is absolutely amazing.
Unreal. His movie knowledge.
When he stood in front of you and cried like a baby, it's kind of hard to take him seriously. So I'm like,
my gosh, no, I couldn't do that. Yeah. He does do a lot of good for forgotten celebrities.
Yes, I'll give him that.
The celebrity who has been forgotten, and they are buried somewhere within Los Angeles, and they've got no marker. He actually has a group of people who will raise money for said marker, and these people get remembered. Like I say, his movie knowledge is incredible.
Yeah.
His obsession with Hilde is something that is. He was actually a consultant on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Yeah. That's like his knowledge is unreal.
I'm not talking about that crap film. I'm sorry.
I like it.
But yes, what about you, Sarah? How did what kind of draws you? What aspects kind of intrigue you in a way?
While I have watched stuff about the big names like Dharma and things like that, I like to find new stories as well. Mm-hmm. Actually, at the moment, I've been watching a lot of the Indian-based ones.
Right.
Oh, good God.
So
you brave girl.
Murder in a Courtroom and stuff like that in India is one of the ones that I've made some notes on to talk about later on. I'll admit that kind of because of obviously the nature of where a lot of the crimes in India take place, the police aren't as modern as obviously what we're used to. So I would kind of say it's the equivalent of the police in the 70s. Mm-hmm. There are some awful ones where it basically shows the police officer going into the victim's house to start an investigation, and they're turning around and commenting on the wallpaper. Mm-hmm.
Oh my God.
Some of them are awful. There are a few that I've had to turn off because of things like that. But some of them, the stories that are actually portrayed are quite interesting, I find, because it's, well, basically the police are still able to be bought off in some areas in India.
Yeah.
So you tend to find that people get away with a lot more over there.
Yeah.
But that's a one that I've got to go into later. I will say though that a lot of my interest came from something that my mum used to collect, actually, which I don't know if you guys have ever seen these before.
Yeah, I've got all of
yeah, of course.
Yeah. My dad gave me his collection, and he had the full collection, and I've got them sitting in a box in storage, and I keep meaning to go and pick them out. So
yeah, I've got these are 3 random ones that I had that I was reading for before I even moved. So I was lucky I found them. But my mum's got like about 120 of them, and some of them are the mainstream stories, some of them are the lesser known ones, and it was kind of like the lesser known ones that I like to read a bit more. And it's like Grant was saying, like My Lover, My Killer and things like that. I tend to watch the ones that are like a story a week, a story an episode things.
Yeah.
No,
definitely, because my interest is like, I've wavered away from like the big names now. Like I think when you first start watching these crime documentaries and stuff, you think, oh, like you watch the Ted Bundys, you watch like the Mansons, you watch Ed Kemps and stuff like that. But then the more you watch, it's the same kind of stuff that they keep going over, and especially when it's like the new Netflix craze. What I said is like releasing like the forgotten tapes or the tapes that's never been released, and literally it's like 20 seconds worth of words that's been said, and it's just going over rehashing the same.
It's not changing the narrative.
I've not watched any of the new Netflix ones about the big names.
No.
Yeah, it's not changing the narrative. It's just again putting the name out to make it relevant because it's a name. Yeah,
that's the thing. But for me, for them ones, like again, if that's what you do enjoy, then that's great. But it's kind of prolonging the agony for like the families and for the victims that potentially like say still go through when they keep bringing out the same narrative or the same stories and stuff like that, or telling different ways and how like they were killed, and it that's where I think from my level it's kind of like, oh, I can probably switch off. But where I'm getting more intrigued, and again this is probably me just showing me age now, it's like the ones that's on Channel 4, like the police 24 hours in police custody, like them are absolutely riveting when like they get the 2-part episodes. Like the last one was The Honey Trap, where
I need to rewatch that because I wasn't paying attention.
Yeah, where these 2 young girls had basically met people online who they knew had money or like had like things that they wanted, and start flirting with them and pretending they have a relationship, and then like say going to meet up, and one of them having sex and the other one sneaking out the back door, leaving the door open for 2 big fuck off blokes to come in to rob him. And on the last one they stabbed the guy in the leg and hit an artery, so you actually
hit his femoral artery, didn't it?
See him bleed out and die. So it was kind of like the investigation behind that. It was just, and how the police went about it, and like the checks, the levels they got. Like one of the guys who did it bought a coat that only 6 people in the UK can buy, because it was like £1,800 coat, and it was just like a puffer jacket. So
fuck that.
So that's how they caught him, because he had this puffer jacket, and it was just like craziness stuff. Like, but that's it's almost harping back to the days, as I said before, watching like Crime Watch and stuff like that.
Yeah, watching the detective side of it. I had a bit of a bad time at the beginning of last year, and this is how I spent my days. I binge watched 24 Hour in Police Custody. What the fuck's wrong with me? I don't know what's wrong with this. That's my downtime. That's how I like switch off. I literally watch from episode 1 up to date of last year of that whole series. I was fucking invested in these policemen and their work.
But that's always quite interesting as well, because you can always know at the start of the episode if the person's guilty or not, because if they blur his face out or not. So
Yeah, I didn't, and
Yeah.
I didn't realize with that show the reason we don't get them as regular is because we have to wait a
Until the
certain
crime
period
happens.
of time after the crime happens for it to go to court for it then to be able to be released to the public. I genuinely didn't know that.
Yeah.
Like I was just like, oh well, we're just not getting another episode.
I told
That
Paul
was
about
good.
this, but someone that used to work for our company, we're a recruitment agency, so we have a lot of staff turnover. Actually was on an episode of 24 Hours in Police Custody.
Which
Wow.
one?
Can you name names?
It's I mean, it's all gone to court and he's been found guilty and everything. We didn't know him. He just worked for the business and it was only a very short amount of time, so it wasn't like he was a trusted employee.
Yeah.
But his name was Kestutis Balzis, and he murdered his girlfriend when he was drunk. And it ended up on 24 Hours, and it was in the town that I work in, and it was one of the worst cases you just had to sit through and watch, because he was he didn't care what he'd done.
Yeah.
There was no remorse at all. He was just like, yeah, I did it.
So
My God.
And that was it. It was
That's
purely that, and that was the hardest thing about it all. She was just his girlfriend, and they were having a drink, and an argument got out of hand, and then something happened, and
yeah.
But I think for me, just sitting watching that episode and seeing how matter of fact he was scared the shit out of me. You know, like you say, Sammy, you don't want it on your doorstep. It was one of those things where you sit back and you're like, oof.
It's too real. Like we live as nerds, we live in a world of fantasy. We live in a world of, this isn't real. This is, we are just visually looking at this. But when it becomes real, then you're like, fuck no, my brain can't fucking take that. That can take any slaughter movie, but I cannot take that shit.
See, that's why I prefer, other than you, I know you like 24 Hours, but I like 48 Hours, the American one.
Yeah.
Because
I like that.
It's so far away from home. It's like, okay, yes, it's a shooting every week, but still, it's like I don't have to. I can disassociate and I can watch that and go, oh, I've been there, but I don't live there, or I don't work there.
I am a good distance away from where everything is going on. Did anyone used to watch The Homicide Hunter?
Jack.
Detective Kendra.
Yes.
My husband absolutely loves that man. He can just.
My mum loves that one.
It's his voice and how calm he is and how collective he is.
He should always.
He was one cocky bastard, though.
Oh yeah.
He should narrate CSI, the drama voice after that.
But just coming back a little bit to what Dan said about being on your doorstep, because I know I talked about this on the last episode, but just to touch on it again, because there's been a few, I think Crime done a murder town on it, but in Sunderland we had a serial killer called the Sunderland Strangler. I think it was Stephen Grieverson or Lee Grieverson. It was one of the names. That was scary for me because it was literally round the corner from where I lived. I know I was a bit younger than the lads he murdered, but I used to hang about with his sister.
Oh my God!
Yeah, all right.
So that and reading about it now, because basically the big thing with him, it was he was gay, but with him being a northern lad and from Sunderland and being from the time, to be gay was very looked upon. So he was having sex with these teenage boys, and to hide his homosexuality, he was killing them.
Why? And I know that we live near each other, but I can't even remember this happening.
Yeah, but he got away with it for quite a while because, as you said, with the police back then, they weren't looking into homosexual cases as deeply.
They just didn't want to touch them, man.
Yeah, that was the sad thing about it. But it's always quite scary.
I've got another local one that I remember. It's actually it's in 2 days' time. It's actually 15 years since this happened. I don't know if you remember this, Paul, because I know you're quite near me actually. The one at the Harbour Lodge bed and breakfast next to Wearmouth Bridge.
All right. Not heard this one.
You know, there's two on the north side of Weymouth Bridge. Obviously, there's a couple of shops on one side, and there's the car hire place opposite.
Yeah.
There's two B&Bs that are there, and they used to be
Swan Lodge, I think
notorious.
it's called, or something. Yeah.
I think it's Barclay and the Harbour Lodge.
Yeah.
There's two there, and they used to be notorious for, it would be where they put people who weren't very well off, people who basically were homeless, or it would be what was called the DFS.
Used to be like
rooms.
first, if you got released from prison as well, used to get sent there as
Yeah,
well.
like a halfway house and stuff like that. Basically, in 2008, two men murdered two homeless men in the basement of that B&B with shovels, and they hit them so hard that the shovels broke. And apparently, it was just like an abattoir inside when the police found it. It was quite a big case. It was a horrible case. It was horrible because the thing was, right, I remember the police tape being there because I was getting the bus into town every day at that point. And the bus, it's like basically the curb is there, the bus is there, and like the B&B is here, so you were like less than 5 meters away from the room where it happened as the bus went past. It was awful. I mean, they were caught very soon after, but it was just so scary that something so atrocious and like brutal could happen. Like literally, it was basically a wall between where you would walk on the street, and that happened on the inside of the wall. I found that really scary.
Right. Did I mention on the last one about the one that happened outside my actual doorstep?
No.
So I'm from a little village called Shiny Row. I have lived here all of my life, but I have scattered away from time to time. But 5 years ago, me and Ant moved back. I literally live on the street that I grew up in. And we moved back, and a woman who was a nail technician, I believe, from Manila, I could be wrong, was murdered in my village. And she was put into a car and she was set on fire, not a few meters away from where we are sitting right now in the car. It was all over the local news, and the two guys who did it. So what had happened was she was called out. She worked for a nail business, but I think she did other business on the side, and she was called out to a job in Shiny Row and to these two guys' house. Now, these two guys, they met in prison. One was done for arson of an old man's house. He set the house on fire while he was inside and stole from him. The other one was, I believe, the R word. I don't want to say it, but So he was done for that. They met in prison. They then moved to Shiny Row. She comes to the house. They do the most, unthinkable things to this poor lady. They steal from her. They go to Shiny, which is just here. They go to Shiny. They use her bank card. Purchase dinner on her. Have dinner. Put her in the car. Drive her not a few feet away from where we're sitting right now. Set the car on fire and walk away.
I think
These two men combined their previous crimes on this one woman.
The worst thing,
this is why reform in our fucking country does not work.
But as well, I don't think you mentioned this one on the podcast as well. There was a very famous one, especially in the northeast, that happened outside of your work. If you remember that one, Sammy. Yep. The woman who worked at, I'll not say the name of the company, but she had a person speak to her, and she found out where she was, and he stabbed her in the car park.
He didn't.
Was it not?
I can't tell you the story because I actually know the person.
Right.
That did happen, but she knew him.
Right.
We worked in the same building. I'm very good friends with the person who it is. She's very much alive. But yeah, he. Oh no! I know exactly who it is, and I will not say her name. But she, she got took to they went to the car park. They used to see each other. Went to the car park, and he stabbed her with a screwdriver. And she walked into.
Like say when I went in for the interview, and said that's why they said we couldn't go outside because
no, she dragged herself into the building. and it was a horrific scene, but she is very much alive. The girl is doing very well. Horrific court case, but yeah, that was that was. I remember that day. It was fucking horrible. Yeah, I live in the worst place.
No,
I really do.
We have one not so far away, and you'll all know the name when I say it. Joanna Dennehy.
Right.
She is fucking the devil, that woman.
She moved here to Peterborough, which is, I don't live in the city, I live in a little village outside, far enough away from her, thank God. But the things that she did, she's the one that fascinates me psychology wise, because she's another Aileen Wuornos type, in the sense of that she was psychologically wronged for years, but then she flipped it, because when you see her upbringing, she had one of the most privileged upbringings any of these people have ever had. Her mum said until the age of like 14, 15, she was one of the most, like, she studied, she was social, she had absolutely no, not a bad bone in her body, she'd do anything for anyone. And something clicked in in puberty years. But she managed, and I don't know how much she was involved within the murders themselves, or whether she did them. I think to a degree she had something to do with them, because it's one of those ones that, because it's so close to home, I try not to think about it too much.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Like, she is evil.
We have these drainage systems here called dikes, because where we live is incredibly flat. We have no hills here. There's no such thing as a hill. So the drainage ditches are called dikes. And what she did was she coerced these two slightly less intelligent gentlemen, shall we say, to do her bidding for her. And they yeeted these men into these drainage ditches. And they weren't found. So they were spread a bit further than Peterborough at the time, but it mainly all started from around here. And I just remember thinking to myself, that's odd. It was such a bizarre case, because women are not your typical.
Yeah, it's not your go-to, is it?
She had kids as well.
Yeah.
Like, she had a relationship with somebody, and apparently, I think I'm remembering. I think it's her. Like, she was like really into drugs, but then when she got pregnant, she just stopped it.
Yeah,
had the kid, back on the drugs. Had another kid, stopped it, back on the drugs, and then I think I don't know what like legal status they were, but her partner then at some point either kicked her out or she went, and he was like, right, I have custody of these children, kind of thing. But
I think she used to just do disappearing acts. She'd just disappear for months on end, like, and leave him with the babies.
It's very like gender roles, but it is kind of mothers shouldn't do that kind of thing. Like, people, that's kind of like, it's like Rose West, you know. People like that are terrifying, because they're meant to be looking after people, not.
It's when they don't have that maternal instinct. It's just like, but they just see them
kids.
as,
It's actually something I wrote about. Part of my degree was in criminology, and although I can't remember in detail what my final essay was about that, it was a lot based on how women are portrayed when they've committed serious crime compared to men who are portrayed. It's like kind of like a lot of the cases that I looked at, I found that even when a man was the main culprit of the crime, it still kind of somehow was often linked back to a woman. Oh, he did it because of an ex, he did it because he had a bad upbringing by his mother, things like that. And I mean, I remember writing about when I was writing it, Myra Hindley had died. And I remember the headlines in the newspaper, and I mentioned that in it because I remember one of the headlines was "The Devil is Dead."
Yeah.
Such a good headline.
It was a great headline. It was just kind of more to do with how women are portrayed as more monstrous when it's them who commits the crime, especially when it comes to murder and things like that. Whereas although men are seen as like, evil and things like that, women are seen as mad, insane.
It's like
I
kind
think
of almost always expected to be a male type.
Like
not
sexual deviance as well.
No, not like Rosie. My dad when I told him that we did the last one, he was in, oh, you should have had me on as a guest, because my dad was the officer who was in charge of watching Rose West while he was a prison officer. And
Oh
he
my
could,
God.
yeah, he was like, "Oh, you should have had me on." I was like, "You would not have, you wouldn't have said anything." He was like, "Probably not, but I could have answered questions." I was like, "What? Like what? She did fuck all."
Yeah, what were you going to say there, Lauren?
I was gonna say, like, some people, like, yeah, they twist it, especially with women, but people like Mara Hindley definitely deserve the title of devil because
Oh,
she
I'm not
was
denying that at all.
she was a fucking monster.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And
For me, it's the ones that drag it out till the end. They'll do the murder. They'll not. It was the not telling the families where they were buried.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
like there's
And
still that poor little
yes.
boy
They
That-
died with
uh-huh.
that knowledge.
found.
Mhm.
That
Yeah.
to me,
Heartbreaking.
you can quantify murder, although you can't understand why, and you don't agree with it, and you don't. It's the ongoing pain by proxy they're causing the family by
Mhm.
dragging out this weird sense of pleasure that they get from having that upper hand still
It's like a kind
the
of like
whole
a
time.
control aspect, isn't it, though,
Yeah.
as well?
Mhm.
'Cause,
Yeah.
The only
because
thing
it's
they've
just-
got.
Yeah, because I think Ian Brody, like towards the end, just did want to do it for a day out. So yeah, I'll show you where the body is, and just went for a walk around the moors.
Yeah.
That was kind of like
Just
his,
took in the sights of where he did it.
yeah.
Sick and
Horrible.
sadistic man that he is.
And I know
Thank
like
fuck
going along
he's
this
dead.
subject for quite a while. So Lauren, what kind of drew you in?
Oh, cool,
Um,
Lauren. Sorry, love.
I mean, but back to like Fred and Rose West, I remember that. I
Mhm.
remember
Yeah.
them in like the early 90s, that happening because my parents didn't really like, they weren't like, "Oh, it's the news, you know, don't watch this," kind of thing. They just kind of let me wander in and out and watch this.
Because we were 90s kids, that's why.
Yeah, but I think it was on Newsround as well. Like, I don't know if I'm misremembering that, but if you're 90s kids, you remember Newsround, and
Yes.
like
Yeah,
it would
I
be like
remember
the
Newsround.
watered down version of the news, and I remember them like reporting from like, you
Cromwell
know,
Street.
Cromwell Street,
And the
25
day
Cromwell
that
Street.
the day that they demolished the house, it was on
Yeah,
fucking
and just,
GMTV
like,
or something.
it being on, it was huge. It was huge. And then like growing up again through the 90s, horrible like stuff happened, and you know, like stuff like Millie Dowell and Sarah Payne and like children going missing, and it's just like it kind of like brought it to reality, because it was like, if you're not careful, this is going to happen to you, kind of thing. So
yeah, like it generally could happen.
so
Like
but
this-
yeah,
So almost like a self-protection type thing to get into it.
Just so you know.
almost.
Yeah.
I don't know that I ever watched it though. I just kind of like,
Mhm.
I liked being informed. I think I liked kind of like absorbing current facts and affairs.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't just like
Mhm.
horrific murders. I'd be interested in like,
Mhm.
it was just like a form of learning to me. And then when I kind of like started to grow up, I did a bit of psychology in college,
Mhm.
and nature nurture came into it, and obviously that's a big pull,
Mhm.
because we were talking earlier about the head trauma
Mm.
aspect. That's very much something, because I feel a lot of like YouTubers who do crime, like there's Bailey Sarian, but I also watch Daniel Kirsty and Kendall Ray and
Mhm.
stuff. And I find a lot of these YouTubers interesting because they will often they take the time to, where appropriate, talk about the victims,
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
some families don't like it. They don't like it. So
Mhm.
obviously, if in that case they won't talk about them out of respect for the family's wishes. But I can't, like is the wrong word, but I value where you learn about these people,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and they're not just a statistic, and
Yeah.
they're not just like
It's
a
a person.
notch. Yeah, it's a person.
It's a life. It's a life that's
It's a
being
life,
destroyed.
and then that kind of makes it detaches the killer, and it just makes them seem more evil, because you
Yeah.
kind of learn about, and like,
They've taken away this person
Yeah.
that is a real person.
Yeah.
It's just not just a name, or like say a tick, like another like a tick box type situation.
but yeah, I derailed myself there. But there's it's called McDonald triad or something.
Right.
It's about another theory within like killers, where it's these three things that happen if people display this in childhood. It's not saying they will be a serial killer, but
Mhm.
it's bedwetting, fire setting, and hurting animals.
Right.
And if the kids display all three, then it's just like almost like.
Well, that was a firebug
lock
when I was a
them up.
kid. So
I was a firebug,
Yeah.
but I didn't wet the bed and
no,
I didn't hurt animals. It's
no,
like,
I've got a story to tell you about with firebugs. We'll leave that for a little bit later.
but yeah, when these people do all this in childhood, it is very often that they have a tendency to not quite be right.
Yeah.
Kind of obviously. But then again, a lot of these do come from like the trauma of like abuse or head injury. And it is kind of important to report this, like not so you think, because again, people do say that you can kind of understand that these people have been traumatized and hurt and stuff, but still be like, they're an evil piece of shit.
Yeah.
But they're an evil. Is it because they were tortured, or were they just born wrong?
I think with a lot of things as well, it's like, as you said, it's how prepared they are to go to that next level, because you probably can show the signs, or you can have the traits, but still you could still have the moral compass, or like that belief to stop yourself and do things, because we all get them. Not this is going to sound wrong. We all get them thoughts where you think, I could kill someone, but you wouldn't actually go through and do it. Or like, say, if someone annoys you so much, probably is goodwill, where you could feel like strangling them, but you think, no, you never would push yourself to them limits as well. It's the person that kind of doesn't have that stop gap or that thought process where it thinks, I'm annoyed, but I'm not going to take it out. I'm going to act like an adult and not, or I'm going to act like a human being, not just an adult.
Well, it's you taking responsibility for your mental health. Your mental health puts everything into perspective for you, whereas other people tend to not, and that trauma then builds and builds and builds and becomes something that is.
I just want to put a disclaimer out there. Goodwill, you're safe. I am not going to kill you. Don't worry.
Oh yeah, Goodwill. I would never let him hurt you ever.
But yes, one of the things I did want to touch on as well, because one of the things I have found fascinating, like recently or even the last few months, it's not just like the murder true crimes, especially like in America, or even like one of the recent ones I've watched about in Italy, is the sporting ones, the sporting crimes, like match fixing, points shaving, like throwing games, and it's mostly in America. It's based on American college, either basketball or college football players, where these young people are coming from like the ghetto or nothing, put in a position where they've been given like the limelight of like college football, and they don't get paid anything. They've still got to pay for their own tuition. They've got to pay for food and board. And the college like institution are making millions and millions of pounds out of them till they like go there. So then these shitty characters come in the background and kind of tempt them into like not even like thousands of pounds. We're talking a couple of £100, just so they can eat, or just so they can buy themselves new trainers and stuff like that. And the way the police and the American institution come down on not the people that's kind of like the people who are in the background and think they're getting like 2 years suspended sentence, and then these kids are getting like 3 years in prison, and then banned from all sports for life. And it's just crazy when you watch like that type of element come into it. And like the same with I watched I don't know, it was huge on the news in like a few years ago, was the Juventus scandal, where the sporting director of Juventus had some clout or power with the referees association, so he kind of used it to get the referees he wanted and getting decisions he wanted, so Juventus would be either win the league or be up there. And the way the police went after these people, like putting money in wiretaps, where you're thinking if they were committing, like, fair enough, like sport and everything, it's big money, but these big money in type institutions where they've been concentrated, like the police force on, it's like, if you had these resources on other crimes or other things, would this not, like, say, would it be not better suited to go after the real well, not saying real murder, like things and stuff like that, but it's just shocking how they went after these people because they institute like money or sport and stuff like that, where murderers and stuff can get away with stuff for so long or not looked at in different ways.
Well,
Yeah.
it's a classist society with the sporting,
Mm-hmm.
isn't it? It's if you've got the money, you can get away with it, but if
Money.
you haven't got any money, then you're going to prison.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the scary thing we do live in. That is, and you said going back to that swimmer as well, because he was a well-to-do family and money, that like they weren't going to get him, and he was guilty as sin. The judge knew he was guilty as sin, and he was going to get it. Fucking O.J. Simpson, biggest crime or true crime we've ever watched, and we basically watched him like not commit the crime, but basically
Might
his
as well
guilty was all of it, but because he had money and because he had a name. I think he got found guilty not for murder, but wasn't it for like tax or something where they got him actually in jail?
No, it was
for that?
stolen goods.
Stolen goods.
He stole his own merchandise and got 36 years for it. Fucking so the OJ trial wasn't a case of like OJ. I want to say this in the nicest way possible. OJ was the whitest black man going. He lived in a white world, and he did have money. And he had the money to back it up with the guys that he had for his defense, like the likes of Johnny Cochran. And we'll never understand in a million years why Robert Kardashian was actually there, because he was a family fucking lawyer. He had nothing to do with criminal court at all, but he had his dream team. It was around it. So in the 90s in Los Angeles, you had the LA riots and the Rodney King incident not long happening, and the jury that they had was predominantly black. This was their way saying fuck you to the police, getting OJ off because of what happened to Rodney King. It was so fucking political, which is why I generally believe that, not political, that's such a wrong word, wasn't it? Especially for what happened. But I generally believe that OJ got that long-term sentence for stealing his own merchandise as another fuck you, OJ. You are now going to serve some time, because that fucker, that book he brought out afterwards. What was the title of it?
If I Did It.
If I did it. You fucking did it. But yeah.
That just shows, like, say, when it comes to money to the aspect, it changes the game for a lot of these people as well. But no, like I said, that shocked me as well. Like, I know. We did go into it a little bit as well. The other true crime, well, call it true crime. Grant will probably watch these as well. Is the Beyond? I've forgotten its name now. Is the wrestling one that was on Void?
Dark Side of the Ring.
Dark Side of the Ring. That was the one.
Yeah.
Some of the stories and things like that, where wrestlers getting shanked in the changing rooms because they wouldn't play a ball. I think that was.
That broke my heart. That story.
I can't remember it now.
I can't remember. It was
Brody.
Bruiser Brody, that was it. That one broke my heart. I bawled my eyes out at that.
Yeah, and like the Ric Flair incidents and everything that happened on like the famous flight from hell, and again, because wrestling is larger than life, and the characters who are in it are larger than life, and here some of the exploits, what they get up to or get away with, is just mind-blowing and shocking to the 10th degree. And I know that they're talking about doing a new season as well, so it'll be quite interesting to see season 4 who or what stories are going to be told in that. But anyone that is into like sports or true crime, even just true crime, watch them, because they are so far beyond believable. Like saying sad in aspects, like say the sad stories,
Really
there's
sad.
stories that make you mad. Like the Jake the Snake one is just harrowing to watch.
But then you got Chris Benoit.
Yes.
Yeah, Laura's just why Benoit even slipped my mind.
Yeah.
When you talk about wrestling, when you talk about sport, crime, Benoit should have been at the forefront.
But he's another one like Chris Watts.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry,
I just growl when I hear his name. Sorry, Grant.
No, I think the one with Benoit as well, there's a lot of different angles of looking at it, but I think a lot of it goes back to what Dan said earlier about the head trauma.
Yeah.
And or was I can't even pronounce it. It's the same thing that the American footballers are getting
Yeah.
after something encephalite.
It's like
Yeah,
concussion.
encephalopathy.
It's
That's the
concussion.
one.
Yeah.
It's
Long words.
You know, and
It's
looking
I think it's
back
called
into Chris Benoit's like background and the amount of chair shots he had, and that his special move thing, that diving headbutt thing, and looking historically back at wrestlers that had used that move and the levels of head trauma and neck injuries and disabilities that they'd developed later on in life. I am not in any way trying to suggest innocence in
No.
Benoit, but the circumstance surrounding those traumatic levels of brain injury and where it put his mind as a result it's definitely something that we need to look at as for a result of all athletes. You know what I mean? Because rugby players are going down left, right, and centre. Everybody knows I'm a massive rugby fan, and there's a big link now between motor neuron syndrome and the way that rugby players were constantly getting injuries and what have you. I think we're only starting to scratch the surface with the older athletes as to what had happened to them over the course of the 70s and 80s when they were just getting shook up and brained every week. You know what I mean?
There was a documentary about a American footballer,
Gabriel Hernandez.
Yes, and I got so angry at that, and not for the reasons that I should have. Obviously, what he did was horrific. You can't take away from the crime, but when is the NFL going to take responsibility for what they've done to their players in order for head trauma to become as bad as what happened to him? And the same with wrestling as well. I think wrestling took somewhat of a responsibility when they stopped doing them kind of shots, and they did start taking concussions quite seriously. But the NFL don't show any responsibility.
Yeah, but when it comes to wrestling, it's not all wrestling, because there is still 8 companies that do take extra risks to get, like, say, the money in. And as much shit as the WWE does get, they have a lot more safety protocols in place. Probably down to the shit show that happened after the Benoit, because, like, say, they didn't know the full story, and rightly or wrongly, they reacted and done a 1 hour special on Benoit when they realised he'd passed away on the next night in Raw. After they realised what had happened, they fucked up and basically backtracked heavily, which they had to. But then they've went too.
Sorry.
No, then they went too far on the other side of things as well, by trying to bury everything that came before it. And again, there's a lot of discussions and arguments about that. Is like, does his actions on that day take away? Not because with Benoit as well, it's not just him in the ring, there's the other person that's in with him. So when you take away his work or his thing, you're taking away that other person's potential legacy and his work as well. So that's the thing I heard. I know when you listen to people like Kurt Angle and Chris Jericho, they still talk about Chris Benoit before the incident, and they talk about him fondly, and they get a lot of backlash because of that. And same with Mick Foley, and Mick Foley is one of the nicest people in the world, but he won't talk about Benoit from what happened. He'll only talk about the Benoit he knew, which must be incredibly difficult for a lot of people to accept.
It's them trying to make sense of, like, that was the person, the action doesn't reflect the person that they know. So it's them trying to make sense of it. Cena did not fucking handle that well at all. They did a Larry King interview, and you had Jericho, who was a very close friend of his, and you had fucking Cena, who's a corporate kiss ass, who was answering on behalf of the WWE, and it was disgusting the way he handled it. Jericho was trying to say, there's got to be answers, there's got to be reasons, there's got to be something, like, that's not my friend. And John's like, no, he did it. We all have to now forget about him. Just forget about him. Oh, what fucking John? I do like John Cena.
Am I right in saying, though, that Chris Jericho is one of the guys that bought the Dark Side of the Ring to the telly?
Yeah,
he's like one of the producers.
So.
He's the narrative. He does the narrative.
I think he's one of the producers and something like that as well. But I mean, they do. I remember on the Roddy Piper one they did, he was actually interviewed and said, and he was talking about how much he meant to him and things like that. So I know he's been on it. That's why I was just like,
he's a narrator as well, isn't he? He narrates it.
But the sad thing about it as well is when it comes to it, the Benoit family got hurt because of it. So like his son David, that was from a different
Yeah.
marriage, and they basically got blacklisted, and the only people that kept in touch was Chavo Guerrero and Chris Jericho. They were the only two, like few people that actually helped out and tried to like bridge gaps with, like say, the other side of the family there. And it's I hate you. It's an interesting story, as you said. There's so many different facets and so many different viewpoints. And it's heartbreaking in a way. As I said, the real victims in it is like his wife and his little son. But when you hear the stories behind it, and again, that must be so difficult for the families to hear when they find out like what came out afterwards. But as you said, it is carbon copy for studies for head trauma and how it can change people or affect people in different ways. And again, not to say that that can happen for everyone, but
Yeah.
the more cases that do happen and have it like it could well be, and we'll never excuse it, but we'll try and like say potentially learn from it and like say stop it from potentially happening from the signs there. But again, just to throw the question back at you guys, is there any other cases or big stories that like hit yous hard, or like say not because it was at home, or the ones that kind of affected you?
Ooh.
Can I go?
Yep, go for it. Sam.
Yeah.
Just because I've got two relatively close calls that were local as well. I went to college in Darlington in the mid-90s. It's why I've got this weird accent, because I've been moved all around.
We don't know where you're from.
Yeah, nobody can tell where I'm from. Nothing massively close, but there was a case over there while I was at college over there by a guy called David Harker. I'm going to make Sammy throw up a little bit here because he's known as the Darlington Cannibal. He took a girl home on a night out and murdered her and cut her into bits and ate some of her. I don't think I ever occupied the same kind of friendship circle, so to speak, as this guy, but he was part of the live music scene down there while I was just starting a gig. So, undoubtedly would kind of cross paths over the course of the few months leading up to it, which was a little bit weird. And the other one was, is it Alice Ruggles? She was murdered in Bensham a few years back by a controlling piece of shit whose name I can't remember, which is just as well because he doesn't deserve to be fucking remembered. But for a long, long time, I believe that I lived in the house where she was murdered.
Right.
Jesus.
It's only very, very recently, off the back of the episode My Lover, My Killer on Netflix, that I managed to see some of the original TV footage from where they had it cordoned off, and it wasn't my flat, it was the one next door.
Nice.
But yeah.
Oh, I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, it had made a lot of sense because I'd got that flat and it was 75 quid cheaper than every other flat on the street. I didn't know this at the time. And then one day I opened the door to a pizza shop, to the pizza guy, and he just looked at us and went, "Is this the house where that lass got killed?" And I looked down at Jacob, who was about 7 at the time, and went, "Cheers for that, mate. That's going to take some explaining." But then looked into it, realised my bathroom had been done out brand new and what have you. There was marks where the door had been kicked in. I just thought, fuck. And like I say, it wasn't until that came out literally a couple of weeks ago and I saw the footage and realised it was the one next door, and all of the bits about my flat that made sense was just a weird coincidence. But yeah, that was, and I've ended up looking into that one a little bit because it involves a malignant narcissist and a stalker and the bloke that did it. And I know it just because it was so close to home, it's one of those smaller ones that I went and looked at a lot. And I've always kind of hung on to that one a little bit as well, both of them, because both of them were close for different ways. Obviously, the first one with the guy in Darlington, it was the fact that I had probably had brushed past him at gigs and, maybe even stood and had a pint with him because of the amount of mutual friends and what have you that were mingling. And then the Ruggles one, just because it was so like, whoa, really?
It's your fucking house, dude. You live there.
I'm not a spiritual person. I'm not one for ghosts and hauntings and that kind of thing, but it still left me with quite an uneasy feeling after I found out.
There was an energy there.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
What about you, Lauren?
It's hard to say. I spent most of my life in Birmingham, and Birmingham's quite a big city, so I wouldn't say I'm desensitized to like murder and things and stabbings, but it's Birmingham. Like a lot kind of goes on here, but
Mhm.
there's a couple of things. There's I think one case that really like I never could quite detach from as a kid was the Dunblane tragedy.
Yeah.
If we're going to count
Oh,
that
yeah,
as
of
Yeah.
course.
true crime, because I was in primary school when that happened, and
Mhm.
I went to a little country primary school because I grew up in like the countryside at first, and it was just horrifying
Yeah.
to just like
Mhm.
picture that
I think with that one, it was
happening
so
to
scary because you hear about the American ones and having it
yeah
over here, like being more,
yeah
yeah, brutal. Like that one, I remember the day when you're
Mhm.
watching it.
It's close to Mother's Day, wasn't it?
yeah
I remember it. But what a powerful movement after that
yeah
really
like
tragic
Yeah.
incident. Them people fucking fought, and
Mhm.
look at our statistics in comparison to some parts of the world.
yeah like there's no fucking nonsense after it. It's just
No,
like
Yeah.
did it done.
no. There was a brilliant
And
documentary done not long ago about that. Fantastic work from them people. Them parents are so strong.
No fucking Charles Heston saying they'll take this gun out of my dead dying hand.
no,
It's-
fuck that.
God.
There is a case though, well, two cases, because I wanted to speak about this because it will sound made up,
Mhm.
but there's the Pipe Pace murders, which it's two murders that happened 160 years apart. The first
Wow.
one was Mary Ashford, who was murdered in 1817 when she was 20 years old. She was coming home from a dance at this pub, which is still there. It's like one of the oldest pubs, like in the city, like right down, like a few miles away from where I am. It's and there was a dance there. She was whatever they did in the early hundreds, but she was found in a gravel pit
Mhm.
around the area. It's now Pipe Pace Park, which has got a lovely big fun fair set up there right now. But she'd been assaulted and like left to die and drown in this gravel pit.
Right.
They tried to convict this local labourer, but he got acquitted. And fast forward until 1974, Barbara Forrest, who was also age 20, was murdered. Very similar place. Like she was found just on the edge of Pipe Pace Park near this big road called Chester Road, which is a hugely long road. She'd been out in the city with a boyfriend. He'd put her on the bus, and she was just found dead. They were both found around about Whit Monday.
Mhm.
So they'd both last been seen on May 27th, which is why I say it sounds made up.
Mhm.
They were both 20. They both vanished on May the 27th. They were
Mhm.
both found in the same kind of like area, like Parkland,
Mhm.
down in like North Birmingham. And the guy also in this case was acquitted.
Mhm.
And the two suspects had the same surname, which was Thornton. This is true. This is true. Like
That's
this actually
fucking
happened.
crazy.
It's messed up. It's messed up. But they were both assaulted, and yeah, it's really spooky.
So were they
So
related or anything, or was it just had the same surname?
I think it's just coincidence, but it's hard to tell because it's 160. Like the guy who was acquitted of the first murder emigrated to America,
Right.
so they're probably not related. But it's just so strange. It's
That's
just so strange.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. It's like
Can't
one of
even
those
get my
really
head
creepy
around it.
mysteries. Yeah, it's really creepy. It's just so creepy.
I wonder if in so many
It's so
years the same
creepy.
thing is going to happen again with the same. It's
I
like
hope
it's
not.
going to like be a
But
Pennywise situation.
but no, it's just
Every
it's just a
27.
very
Mhm.
like that's kind of like stuck with me as well because
Yeah.
Mhm.
you know they were both young lasses and they'd been on a night out the
Yeah.
same night and
Mhm.
then
Which
they
is
both
the sad
died
case for a lot of
horribly.
different stories. Always like end that way as well. Though that's a scary thing.
But yeah,
God, that's nuts.
Mhm.
it there's not a huge amount of information. It's not a very famous case or
Mhm.
cases, but no, Pipe Pace murders. If anybody wants to
Ah, I will look into that one.
go have a little look.
What about
That's
you?
crazy.
What about you, Sarah?
It's not one that affected me personally, but there was a little while ago, a member of the family who we didn't know about at the time was looking at the family history, and came across a few cases that were interesting, but ultimately we either couldn't 100% rule them as part of the family, or we definitely ruled them out as part of the family. But the two cases were quite interesting to me. I mean, the one that we did rule out was there were two brothers in the Guy Fawkes conspiracy who would go by the same surname as me. There was
is that
Robert
where you
and
get your little
William
defining
Winter.
streak from?
So for a while we did think they were part of our family tree, but thankfully not. They're from a different strain of Winters.
Right.
The
other
one,
of that.
I thought it was quite a cool fact, but it was later confirmed that they weren't ours.
Right.
The other one is this hasn't been. We couldn't figure out either way whether he was or was not part of our family. But there's a place up near Morpeth called Winter's Gibbet.
Right.
Now,
sorry,
do you
gibbets
know what?
Just Midler.
You know what gibbets are?
Yes.
I have no
Yeah.
idea, but it sounds
I know.
hilarious.
Basically, like a big wooden pillar. It looks a bit like a
Oh.
single gallows, but it's
It's
a
not
metal
that funny then.
cage.
Not where I live. Yeah,
Have
not
you
where
seen
I
it?
live. That's not what it's called where I live. It's
It's
the
like a metal
inside
cage instead of a noose, and they either put like somebody in there to starve to death, or they put a dead body in there.
Oh yeah,
as
that's
a
not
warning.
hilarious at all.
Yeah. There's a one called Winter's Gibbet near Morpeth.
Right.
And this is from like 1791. This one. So there was a lady who called Margaret Crozier who lived in a village up there, and a fellow named William Winter believed her to be quite well off. So him and two female accomplices, Jane and Eleanor Clark, broke into her house, murdered her, and robbed her.
This sounds charming.
Very charming people. The three of them were hung at Westgate in Newcastle in 1792, but William Winter's body was taken to Steng Cross, which wasn't actually far from where the murder site was, and hung in the gibbet for many years until even his clothes had rotted away.
Jesus.
What? That's brutal.
Some people have said that they've seen his ghost up there, but the gibbet was taken down and then re-erected, and then I think it's up at the minute. I believe they put it back up. But yeah, that they couldn't be ruled out.
So I'll tell you, we're going for a day trip to have a look up at it now. So.
I'm gonna go and see this. I've never even heard of this before.
Yeah, it's not something that like that I'm quite sure I want in the family tree or not, but we couldn't rule it out as either for or against. But it was something interesting that I looked a little bit into.
So don't fuck with Sarah and don't fuck with Sammy. That's what that was all
yeah,
there. There's a little bit of could be in there if we're talking about, like, say that if it's nature rather than nurture type thing.
That is so insane. We only found online that some bugger married two people and the family tree branched off, and then one had something to do with a brothel in the local area.
Have you got the address?
That's so.
I mean, on the other side of the family tree, on my mother's side, my granddad was interviewed for Wearside Jack, but a lot of
I think everyone was well in it.
A lot of Macam men were at the time.
I forgot to mention this on the last one, but Ant's dad was actually interviewed for the Yorkshire Ripper.
Yeah,
because he was a miner from Sunderland, so that's where I was like, I completely forgot about that.
Yeah, I think everyone in the northeast was basically interviewed at one point.
Yeah, crazy.
That was the story that one. Well, there was two stories that affected me really badly, and I was born the year he was caught. Peter Sutcliffe.
Yeah,
and only now they're releasing what he actually really did to those women. It was kept very under wraps. I don't know whether it was time or whether it was propriety or it was just the families didn't want it released, but now you're actually finding out, like, with one of his victims, he put her inside of an old sofa around the back of a one of these yards places, like just abandoned places he found, and there was an old sofa with sofa cushions, and he put her under the sofa and he would go back and see her, and he would visit her over a long period of time, and he'd do different things to her body, like put makeup on her and brush her hair. And when they found her, they only found her because her arm was sticking out of the sofa because she hadn't been put away. And the amount of times that the police were only like 100 yards away from her, 10 yards away from her, and they never knew she was there. And that's just one of them. But you're finding out more and more how atrocious he really was, because everybody just thought, okay, he's a bloke, he's out there, he's killing prostitutes, he's the Yorkshire Ripper, he's trying to be Jack the Ripper, but when you actually find out the magnitude of the sick torture he did to the women, holy shit, that stays with you. That does. That really does.
I know.
And not all of them were even sex workers.
No.
Just one or two were, or supposed to have
The whole
been.
got tired of that.
Yeah, they didn't connect them all because some were nice girls and
weren't some 13, 14-year-olds as well. I know there was some very young girls at some point as well, and it was just like, oof. When I was old enough to understand the magnitude of the story and how much he'd actually done, and then coming into lockdown and there's more and more stories out there, and you just go, oh, I know that one. And then when Netflix did that documentary, they hardly touched on anything. And I was just like, I was quite not disappointed, because that's not the right word, but it seemed like they weren't really bringing, like you say, bringing anything new to the story.
The BBC did an absolutely fantastic one. It was very victim driven. It was, it was probably the first time that it made me sit up and think, holy shit, like we totally fucking glamorize a lot of these a lot of these monsters and this documentary didn't do that. It's absolutely fantastic. It's a 3-parter on BBC. So fucking good.
It was the one where they actually showed that the police were incompetent and basically cunts. I'm going to use the word because they were complete cunts.
They were.
What
they did was atrocious.
But
the guy in charge just like refusing to be like, oh no, he can't be. He's from where? The hoax tape.
From the northeast, it was from Sunderland.
From our area. My father-in-law got interviewed as part of that roundup. The majority, probably a lot of our family members, got rounded up at that time.
That was the only time when I asked my mum about like when you hear about these stories about like Mary Hindley and stuff like that. I said to my mum, when you were younger, were you ever scared of any of these? She went, only time I actually got scared and didn't go out was when the Yorkshire was about.
Yeah. My other one was Jill Dando, the Jill Dando murder.
Oh yeah, there's going to be a documentary this year about her.
I was 19 at the time when she died, but my mum was a special in the Met Police. And she was dating one of the DIs that was on the case, and it was such a shock, and the lack of information that the police were getting and the cooperation from anybody at the time. It was just, they were trying to, the guy that my mum was dating was like, he wasn't telling us things we weren't allowed to know, but he was kind of keeping you in the loop, as if to say, we've tried everything, and they're as far as I'm concerned, they're still convinced it was Barry George. They're still convinced it was him, but he was acquitted on a retrial.
He's been done twice and still cannot pin it to him. But I think there's a documentary this year coming out about the whole case,
because there's the Serbian angle on it as well. They think because she was reporting on this whole Russian Serbia mafia thing, they think it might have been a hit because it was a gun, and in '99 the guns weren't,
it's not our crime. That's not our crime. That's not our weapon. It was execution style.
It was point blank to the head on her doorstep, and that was, as a 19-year-old woman, you think to yourself, shit, that's on your doorstep. There's no protecting yourself from that. If you're going to get shot, you're going to get shot. But I mean, I wasn't in no limelight, but in your head you're thinking, she was just going to her front door and letting herself in. There was no much more to what she was doing than that simple action. So it did sort of leave that, like, look behind you before you walk in the house kind of thing that stayed with me. But
she was on TV so much, and she was so like, seemed so nice. It's just like, well, if it could happen to this nice lady in
Yeah.
the travel show.
I think that was the first
Crime
time
watch.
that they had like they tried to bring stalking into the forefront, because like fair enough, it probably went on like a lot longer. Like the story of how my mum and dad met, like the stalking there is terrifying. Like back then it's like, oh, it's really sweet, but now it's like creepy as fuck. It's like my dad met my mum at a nightclub. My mum didn't want anything interested like to him, so he found out where she lived and would go to her house each night till she agreed to go out with him. But back then it was like, oh, that's quite sweet. But now it's like,
so
oh.
romantic.
But yeah, but like stalking, that brought stalking more to the forefront, the Jill Dando thing, because that was what they tried like blaming it on, that like I said, the Barry George, like stalking her and keeping an eye, and that brought it, rightly or wrongly, to thing. And so a lot more cases have been brought up since then. I know there should be a lot more laws and stuff brought in to protect women or even men when stalking is involved, especially like say with online stalking and still. It's terrifying what people do get put through and go through type thing. But yeah, I can still remember the Jill Dando one. Fuck, that blew me mind there, Dan.
Terrifying.
The one thing that can come of this conversation, and I will say that I might sound like a preachy weirdo when I say this, but more men need to come forward, bring more cases to the front. Make sure you're being heard, because I want to talk about your cases. I don't want to sit here and moan about women being the victims all the time. I don't want there to be more people getting hurt, but I want more people to talk about their experiences so that we can sit here and say women are just as evil as men. Because it's always very unbalanced in the media, because we're saying, oh yeah, she got shot, she died, she was killed. You know, there isn't enough. There's too much stigma involved, and there shouldn't be shame anymore. We're in a society where gender means nothing. Just talk about it, get it out there. You know.
No,
I want nothing more than it to be a fair playing field for people to feel like that they can come forward and we can talk about these things. And I'm fascinated by the psychology of women that kill. You know, there needs to be more people. I'm hoping that nobody has ever gone through anything like this that's watching this, or even ever does, but you know.
But it just takes one person to be brave enough to reach out. And like I know me and Sammy talked about this a few times. This is our therapy. This is how we get through our week, just by logging on and talking about shit like each time, and it does help us a lot. Like say, and again, I've talked about it in the past. I had really bad mental health before I started Nerdy Up North, due to lockdown and due to feeling trapped and contained. So it's like finding that release and not going out and killing someone. Sorry, but
it's taking responsibility for your own mental health.
But going back to like say what you mentioned about things that do stick with you and affect you as well. This I watched even not too long ago. I couldn't tell you the name of it because I kind of walked in the room halfway through Nick watching it. It was something that she was watching on YouTube, something that she couldn't find on TV and she couldn't find on the dodgy box. It was something that she'd heard, where it was a documentary about these three victims, and it was interwoven different stories that had no connection, but there was like telling their story of how they survived. Like say an incident. What like all three of them were American. I can't remember the third case, but the two that did stick out were like they were in the 30s, like in the 40s and stuff now, but like they're talking about when they were younger that survived like an incident. Like one of them was talking about how she broke it off with a ex-boyfriend and he couldn't handle it, so he went from stalking to kidnapping her, and within I think it was a 12-hour period, he drove her off, tried to kill her by strangling her, stabbed her 36 times, and like say the only reason that she survived being strangled was because a car drove past, so he panicked and he drove past, and she was begging him to take him to a hospital, and he said, yeah, I'll take you to the hospital, and he drove her past the hospital just to mock her.
Oh, you twat.
She managed to get out, and she found like a hotel complex, and she knocked on the door, and some foreign people were in the hotel, so didn't understand what he was saying, and they were trying to kick her out of the room because she was covered in blood and didn't know what happened. But luckily they phoned the police, but she survived this harrowing ordeal, like say where she'd been stabbed 36 times, her throat had been cut, like don't know how, like she was showing you the scars, and I was like, this is just absolutely like the strength that this woman showed just for the life. But the other story like had me in tears. It absolutely broke us. Was a young girl was basically hitchhiking to get, like as American does, to get from one place to the other, and this guy had got her in a van for 24 hours, had done everything he wanted to her, and she was like begging him to let her go, and he go, okay, I'll let you go. He brought her a hatchet and chopped off both her arms, like not just like
I've heard this one.
Yeah.
I've heard this one.
yeah. She got like one of her arms was off in one, and she said she just couldn't couldn't feel anything, and the other one had took a few whacks. He drove her a little bit longer. He kept her arms and threw her in a ravine, and she had
Toy box killer.
I
Is
can't
it the
remember.
toy box killers?
It's the toy box. No,
is
it's not.
it?
But
No.
no, it's
The
not.
toy
But that was
box.
mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, but basically she dragged herself out of this hole, like with no arms, and she managed to walk down this road. Like she basically used the mud in her wounds to stop her from bleeding, otherwise she would have bled to death. And she got picked up, survived. They found the guy that did it. Didn't try him for murder. Tried him for say he got convicted, and in the court when she walked past him, he says, when I get out, I'm going to finish the job. He actually said that to her, and he only served 8 years. And when he got out, he killed someone again, similar type of situation, and that's when he got life. But she was like doing interviews, and all it was like the shot like from the interview was like from like this thing till the last moment when it panned out, and you saw her with like I say the replacement arms, and it was just one of the most. I just couldn't get over like how strong she must have been to survive that. That must have been took some will, and it was just an interest because she was just like telling her story and telling like what got her through, and it was just like it just blew my mind that. And I know there is a lot of strong women out there and strong people. Sorry, but I couldn't imagine going through anything like that, and for them to tell their story and still be there and still be willing to do it just was amazing. It's not just
the going through the ordeal, it's the aftermath, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I'm so sorry.
I need to just be 2 seconds. I've not been traumatized, but I will be right back.
That's fine.
I'm not trying hard enough.
I am going to leave. Hang on.
Oh, good. We've sent 2 of them away. That's all right. We've done
Oh
well.
dear.
But yeah, I still remember that's the one that does stick with us, just because of the brutality and again, you never think people could do it because you don't think you could do that, but there is people out there that do it. But when it comes to like the true crime aspect as well, so is there like say elements that you kind of will like? What would you say? Would you stay away from type thing? What elements would you think, or is there no like boundaries, or is there nothing that you would like want to like say that that's not for me?
Animals. Anything, any situation where an animal has been brought into the true crime aspect, be it through sacrifice, be it through a means to them to reach their potential, if you want to call it so. I can't deal with that. I can't deal with I can't deal with children either.
Yeah.
But I still, as a human, I can sort of also compartmentalize. Yes, that happened. That was awful. Next, but with if it's a dog, I'm like, I can't. I just can't. I can't. And I'm like, that breaks me more than the actual story of a human dying. You know, if a dog dies.
I don't know.
I'm glad I missed that conversation then.
Yeah. Speaking of cat drama, but yeah, I can watch and listen to like the worst kind of things about people, but as soon as it comes to a fuzzy little animal, I just burn in hell. I mean,
Yes.
burn in hell anyway.
You
But I'm just
fucking
like,
what? So I'm so glad I
You're
missed
going
that
to the
side. But did
bottom
nobody
level.
else see us fuck myself in the head with my
I
headphones?
saw
Yeah, we
you.
were just laughing
I
at you. Just
saw
thinking
you.
it's-
You fucking.
everyone's in the chat's just amazed that you're wearing pants, so don't worry.
Oh no,
Um,
I have trousers on tonight. I'm so sorry about that.
No, it's fine. We were just asking, is there anything that you would stay away from that's off limits to you type thing?
Cannibalism,
Right. Okay.
animals,
animals, yeah.
That's about it.
Cannibalism fascinates me.
Fuck
Same.
that.
Same.
Like,
Is it just the fascinating that someone goes through, or what the taste would be like?
Well, it's
talking of the taste, I know what the smell is like.
All right.
Mm.
Well, everyone
I
singed
had an
themselves, so yeah.
I had an operation on my shoulder a couple of years ago where I had a fibroma removed,
hmm
and they basically cut it out and sewed me up. But they used a cauterizing scalpel while they did it,
hmm
and I was only under local anaesthetic, so I could smell myself cooking.
All right. What did you smell like?
Very sweet bacon. It did have a slightly porky, a slightly sweet
Is
porky
that why
smell.
it's known as long pig then?
Yes.
Possibly, but yeah.
Mm. I never thought
I
we'd
don't-
start getting talking about like smelling each other's cooking flesh. But yes, that, like I said, Graham would have been all over that one.
It's all downhill from here.
Did anyone mention the toy box killer before
No.
I
No,
choked
no.
to death?
Waiting for you. Waiting for
Yeah,
Fuck that
I
case.
know of the toy box killer, but Baby
That's the-
Sarian did a video on it, and
She sugarcoated a lot.
she
you.
did. She did.
Because
But
that is one of that actually. I've never felt physically sick
Mhm.
while watching or reading or listening to anything to do about true crime. I listened to that by 3 comedians. Last podcast on the left.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I listened to them do it. Even they couldn't fucking sugarcoat. Like couldn't sugarcoat how deprived that person. Oh, he's awful.
Mhm.
Absolutely horrible. Horrible individual. That one stuck with us for a long time.
Grant's got a bit of a smile on his face there.
Right?
As soon as he
Yes.
like, is it?
He to give a very abridged version, he basically had a trailer on his property where he would have sexual torture devices. He would drug
Fucking machine set up.
Yeah, he would drug women
Mhm.
and basically abuse them
Mhm.
massively. There were animals involved as well as.
Yeah, that's
That's
Have,
why
have you
That's
ever
the
read?
bit.
Have you ever read American Psycho?
Yes.
One,
Oh,
one-
no.
maybe
No, the
once or
bit with
twice.
the drain pipe.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
no. I don't
Okay,
want to talk
imagine
about that.
that, but on a scale of like industrial scale, like he was redneck American Psycho.
Yeah. Like,
There's this
this man had
massive.
tools to his
Yeah.
disposal. He's a
There was
piece
this
of
massive
shit.
lake as well,
Sounds
quite
like a
near
catch,
where
like.
it was, which the police won't search, even though they know there's probably bodies in there. But it's like so
Yeah.
deep. It's something
His-
that they're like, oh, we can't search
His
it.
rap record is just 60 plus.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's all they can say is
But they
60 plus.
can't confirm they'll count. And his daughter was involved. His daughter would help him pick up victims.
It was a fucking family day out.
Mhm.
Wow.
Dick.
Yeah,
I've never felt repulsed. I've walked away from
Hmm.
documentaries. I've cried at documentaries, but I have never been physically sick
Mhm.
apart from that one. That really, really got me.
Mhm.
Got me in the goods. I did not like it.
What about you, Grant?
Don't
Is there
ever wanna
anything
listen
that
to it
you would
again.
stay away from?
I mean, not really, mate. Obviously, there's 3 people here that have barely met me or have barely spoken to me, but I'm sure you and Sammy know that.
Mhm.
I've said it before. I'm a sensory hedonist.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When it comes to any level of subject matter that I'm looking into or that I'm starting to get interested in, I push myself to the limits of what I can stomach. And
Yeah.
yes, it desensitizes, but at the same time, it also can be a massive source of inspiration for me creatively. There was one recently that I found really, really unnerving. I cannot for the life of me remember the name of it, but seeing as though we've spent a lot of time talking about the safety aspects involved with women,
Mhm.
some of you might have watched it. It was done by an investigative journalist on Channel 4 recently, and she basically wanders out into a city centre and pretends to be mortal drunk, and then wanders back to the hotel where she's staying, just to see what will happen in relation to the men following her and people trying it on with her and that kind of stuff. And obviously she has crew at the room and all of this kind of setup. There is safety involved. There's people following her with kind of hidden cameras at a distance and that kind of stuff. But to witness that firsthand and to see the lengths at which some people were going in order to basically attempt to take advantage of her sexually, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Rape, basically, that's what they were going for, because she was definitely not appearing to be able to consent.
Yeah.
And that was a difficult watch. That was a really difficult watch. I wouldn't watch it twice, but I'm glad I watched it.
I remember because there was a lot of hoo-ha and like hell on about it, because there was people arguing the case that was calling the entrapment. I was like, what the fuck? I went, if you can't see where this is wrong,
then you're
the problem
like,
type thing.
Would it be okay if she was really drunk?
Yeah. That's the scary thing. It was like, oh, you shouldn't be doing this because you're entrapping people and putting people like in trouble that potentially wouldn't be. It's no. If she didn't do it, they might have latched onto someone else. That's the facts. And it's basically this type of culture now where everyone gets offended by everything, and you can't, like, they're looking for an excuse to basically kick off or to say that this isn't right and this isn't wrong. It's fair enough. It's basically shown like what women have to go through on a night out. That's
on a day-to-day basis. It's just it's not just nights out. It's daily of what men think that they can actually do. I've seen hundreds. I'm thankful that I've never been put in that position before. But I have seen countless amount of videos of women during the day being followed by men who they say the first instinct they do is put their phone on, which I am so fucking grateful for. I cannot stand in some cases when people instantly grab their phone out and start recording shit. But when it comes to this, it's fucking ideal because it gives them a sense of it's the only protection they have. Is to have their phone with them. Because recording, that's it. Once it's recorded, it's there. It's always there. And the amount of times they have to say no. And no, and it just really, really pays.
And even then, if you say no, or no, I don't want your number, or no, I don't want your drink, people can kick off.
Oh yeah, we're
like, not all men, because not all men are psychos, but you don't know, and that's the problem, and that's why women pick up, and girls, like it's not even just women. It's children in school uniform who get like followed and catcalled and
well, I know say Grant used to run a pub, so he's like seen this type of behavior firsthand, like probably behind the eyes of like more than most and stuff. And again, where we used to drink as well, there used to be people that after they had a few, you used to have to try and get them away from women because of how their behavior was. And again, you never tried to excuse it, but it became too obvious and too repetitive that now them people you don't associate with type thing. And like someone can be as normal as you and I having this conversation, but as soon as they have a drink, they think, oh, it gives them the right to act a certain way or talk to people in a certain way. It's never a good thing. But we're coming back to like say Sarah now. So is there anything that you would like stay away from, or like say that's a no for yourself type thing?
I don't think there's anything that I'd particularly stay away from. In theory, I mean, there's some things that I certainly feel a lot more uncomfortable watching these days. I mean, especially since becoming a mum. Some of the kids ones are a bit more uncomfortable than they used to be. Not saying that they were like in any way good or anything like that, but they've become a lot worse to process and things like that. Certainly that aspect's a bit harder, but
I think picking up on that, the Jamie Bulger case, because again, that's something I remember happening when I was little.
Mhm.
I didn't
Same.
understand until as an adult what they did to him, that poor little
Mhm.
boy.
Yeah.
And his
I
mum is just like an inspiration. Like,
oh, she's a fucking
she
warrior,
is
that woman.
powerful.
Mhm.
She's
Absolute warrior.
incredible.
I read the forensic pathologist report.
Just be careful
Yeah.
as well with that, because I know for a long time online there was a fake one that was going around sending, like, trying to say certain stuff or stuff happened just to glamorize it and stuff as well.
Oh
So-
no,
Mhm.
no, this was genuine. That was not. I remember where I found it. I've read so many forensic pathology reports. I read the Princess Di one, all 100 and something pages of it. That was interesting. Yeah, that stuck with us. That really did. The documentary that ITV did with the tapes,
Mhm.
that was an eye opener. Massive eye opener. If you want to talk about psychology,
Yeah.
that is
I think the scary thing,
keynotes.
I think the scary thing that is just how emotionless them two boys were. They were not bothered.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
One was, which they always said was the ringleader, which is the one who's now emigrated to Australia.
Venables.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But he kind of give a shit, but not to the extent of, it was more he
That
was
he'd
getting
been
in
caught.
trouble.
He'd been caught.
Yeah, like I heard, like he
That's
was
what I
getting
mean. They
in
weren't
trouble.
bothered about, like, the actions or the things that they did.
Yeah.
It was more, shit, you've got us. I don't know what to do now.
Almost like a regret afterwards that we've been caught.
Yeah.
But
Horrific.
what were they, 10, 11, 12, those
Yeah.
boys? At 10 or 11 or 12, you know you're right from wrongs.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
But,
God, yeah.
but I'm not defending them in any way. I don't think they knew the magnitude of what they just did.
Yeah.
They're at 10, 11, 12, you can't quantify the amount of trouble, the consequences that will come from your actions at that age. And that's why they came across, in my opinion, from a psychological aspect, that's why they came across so nonchalant, because they had no concept, they had nothing to compare it with, they had no life experience to be able to say,
Yeah.
wow.
But on the flip side of that, they then had no way of being able to be punished for what they did, because they didn't necessarily get punished.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's no, again, reform. It's something that in the UK we completely fucking lack. So it's not surprising that one of them is now a fucking repeat offender.
Mhm.
But I think that
Now,
with the Bulger case, that scared me as well, is the premeditated, like, ideas behind it, because they took him to a canal at one point as well, and they were going to, like, throw him in the canal, but they couldn't get him to get close enough to go in. So that's like the premeditated, like they knew what they wanted to do that day, and that's, like I say, the harrowing thing as well. Again, I know we're talking about age and knowing right from wrong, but it's just scary, like what must have went, because when I was at that age, I was just worried about if I could stay out an extra 10 minutes to play football with my mates.
Yeah.
I
wasn't thinking about anything.
Sorry, Dan, I have to go.
Oh, you're right, go on.
If I may, just in relation to the correlation between right and wrong, because we've touched on this previously with the Bulger murders and how it related to the video nasties hysteria in the 80s. And I think that then pulls us right back into the nature versus nurture thing, because whilst we can say if your average 11 or 12-year-old that they do know the difference between right and wrong, looking at the upbringing that both of them had, whether or not that movie or whatever it is, they're trying to blame it on Child's Play.
I remember that.
Directly inspired it or not, if you are showing kids that are 10 and 11-year-old fucking Child's Play, then you need to question the rest of the environment that they were becoming a product of.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm not trying to, again, fight their innocence, so to speak, but I've seen a lot that would suggest that John Venables, the dead behind the eyes one out of the pair of them, was very much the kind of ringleader and the orchestrator.
It was the other one
pulling the other one along. You know what I mean? And whilst it doesn't put him solely at blame. I think you've got potentially with those two boys that did that another situation where you have a perfect storm of what is going to turn somebody into that kind of person.
Yeah. They tried to pin it on the other kid.
Yeah.
So they initially tried to say that John Venables was a fucking angel. He had to have been brought along for the ride. But when you listen to wasn't until the tapes were released recently that you can tell that dynamic, because it was always the case up until them tapes. That dynamic is not how it presents. And it should have been fucking obvious when the stupid bastard went and reoffended again.
Yeah.
The other one picked up, moved his life to Australia. He's gone. Well, there was no point in staying in the UK. He couldn't fucking stay here. The other one goes straight back home.
What were you going to say?
To a place he's not allowed to be at.
No, I was just going to say, in correlation with the consuming of media that's inappropriate, because obviously I read a lot of comics, and comics aren't just aimed at kids, some are aimed at adults. And when people are just like, oh, can I give my Walking Dead to my 8-year-old? I'm just like, no.
No, you
because
shouldn't.
it's not a comic about shooting zombies. It's a comic about like the psychological breakdown of society that's crumbling under a zombie apocalypse. It's about, and it's not enough that kids can just like watch a horror film or what. I'm not into censorship, by the way. I'll just like state that. But it's not enough to just like sit a kid down in front of a horror film and go, oh, it's okay, it's not real. They need to know it's not real and those actions are not okay. Like Pennywise isn't the hero. Like Jason Voorhees isn't the hero.
No.
You know what I mean, though? But
yeah.
But we can see the entertainment points from all angles as adults. But how can you expect like a 7, 6, 5-year-old to understand the nuance of that?
It's such an interesting argument. It's such an interesting argument because I'm born in 1983. I've been watching horror since I was about 6, 7-year-old.
Same.
But my background is I came from a really loving family. I had an amazing childhood.
But you've already said that you would fail the psychopath test. So.
No, I said I would. There was one aspect I failed on, but I'd still. But
I'm still going to take every pair of scissors off you next time I see you.
I'm not surprised. I honestly, I don't know where it comes from because I have such a morbid curiosity, and it's been there ever since I first actually got into true crime. Was when I found one of my cousins or my dad's Jack the Ripper books. But my point is that we grew up watching them movies at such a young age, but why are we not the same as what it's like right now?
My parents would kind of make sure like it's not like this stuff is not okay. Like
I didn't have a clue.
The villain. Mine did, but I think in balance, I always had like good parents, and I'd also, sit down and watch Care Bears or Animals of Fathom
To be
Wood.
fair, the Care Bear movie was scarier than any fucking horror film I saw.
Animals
That
of Fathom
fucking
Wood.
book.
Yeah,
Animals
that was
of
a
Fathom Wood
trauma.
was traumatizing.
Yeah, but still, I would watch more age-appropriate material. Like
Never-ending story. You'll fuck you up.
Fuck that film.
No, we're not going into that thing.
No. I'm
Watership
not.
down, guys.
I'm not.
Oh, fuck off, Grant.
That's
horrible.
Honestly, the amount of people we have that come to the stall when we're doing shows, and they have a small child, no more than 6. Oh, his favourite's Michael Myers. Have you got any Michael Myers?
Yeah,
When we were kids, right? We watched the films, but we didn't tell our parents because we didn't want to get in trouble.
Yeah,
it wasn't
wrong.
You didn't
That's
physically take a child and sit it in front of
it
and let it watch it, and then go, ha ha ha, he's crying.
Yeah.
Or, I'm not saying that's what all parents do.
No, but my friend actually texted us and said,
because we knew it's wrong.
Yeah.
So
but my friend actually texted us and said, "Is it all right for me, 7-year-old?" And I was like, "Absolutely not." No.
For me, I think going back to what Lauren said, there's a happy balance when we were little, where you were you snuck and watched those films, but the majority of the things you were exposed to were age appropriate.
Yeah.
The only
Right.
stuff that
So
wasn't
there's a balance.
so the only
Right.
time there wasn't was on a Friday night when you'd sit up a bit late because you didn't have school, and your mum had let you watch Cheers and Roseanne and whatever Friends or
Yeah.
whatever your age bracket was, which was slightly above your age range, and you didn't quite get all the jokes, but you felt like you were growing up because you were allowed to watch it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was always that balance, and I think because of I think we've talked about it quite a lot over the couple of podcasts we've done, just the amount of consumption there is of material, of media, of movies out there. Kids are growing up desensitized.
I think that's the word, desensitized now. And again, probably to get in a bit of a, not a soapbox, but to say the how ready in access people can get to pornography now these days. We used to be very happy when we used to find the Daily Sport in a bush around the corner from your house, or you found a Razzle mag and stuff like that. You was like, this is the best day of
hedges.
but
Always
now,
in hedges.
But now
waiting for a taxi and find it under the sofa from the taxi office.
But now you pornography and everything is so ready available. I know they've made steps now to take away the violent pornography, and certain search terms has been taken away. But desensitizing people has been a huge thing. And again, would you attribute that to more sex crimes or sexual abuse to that aspect as well, or being more common these days? That's the questions that potentially you could look at and ask, but without going down the route of could being a Mary Whitehouse and getting me soapbox and ban all this, stop all this. But it's just been making sure things are done in moderation or done the right way. But kids these days as well, I'm not saying we're breeding the perfect storm where we're going to get a flood of new serial killers or new minds, because I do think with certain aspects it's harder to get away with crimes these days.
Murderers now have to be 20 times cleverer than they were in the 70s 80s, because you're watched every 100 meters you've got a camera on you or something. I know they did it's quite scary when you think about it. So to become something like that in this day and age and keep it under wraps and keep the murders going for as long as they can. I don't think is viable in today's society.
Also, because so many of them are streaming everything anyway. So
and then you get the modern day situation now, where the latest one, which is the more shocking one, is actually police that's doing the crimes, and that's the thing that scares you the most, is thinking
Wayne Couzens,
and there was red flags there as well. That's the problem. It's not listening to these traits, or not listening to when things are getting fed back because of who they are or who the situations. There's massive things you can learn, and that's probably why I enjoy them a little bit as well, as the learning part and aspects, and trying to think, let's make this not happen again. I know the way human nature is, and with evolution and shit like that, and without going down too far the rabbit hole, you'll probably never get away with any type of crime or any type of brutality, because let's be honest, man, woman, they always do have that aspect into them. But it's just basically how can we make it as difficult for people to kind of get away or do this without becoming a total police state as well. And that's my little bit of a rant of the day. So I've just realised as well, we've been talking for quite a while as well there. Has anyone got any points or anything that they want to get across that they might have missed off? Because I know you guys have been doing your research, bless you, so I don't want you to feel like you've missed anything.
Nope. I'd like to know what my excuse is, because I'm not a horror fan in the slightest. I've never really watched any.
But you seem to be quite inquisitive and a thirst for knowledge, if you don't mind saying that. So that could be the nature there, where it's not the scary aspect, it's basically the understanding.
Morbid curiosity.
Yes.
Morbid curiosity. I would definitely got morbid curiosity. I always used to say I could probably sit and eat a steak dinner while watching open heart surgery.
No,
fuck that.
I'm not good with blood.
I'm morbid,
I'm told that,
but no, fuck that.
Yeah, it's whenever these whenever there's like, oh, don't eat, watching this episode, I'm just like,
I'm
what?
gonna do that.
Oh, I can do shit like that. Yeah, I could do shit like that, but it's surgery stuff that really like.
But
There's a documentary about the brain surgeons, neurosurgeons in New York on Netflix at the moment, and they have literally film open brain surgery in every episode, and they're like digging about. You see the full thing, and I've been sitting eating my dinner to it because
my wife's the same.
Yeah, it doesn't do anything because I have that also. I think what you were saying about what Sarah has, just that thirst for like, I need to know more. I want to be I have this sponge thing because when you're at school, you have a driven narrative, and when you go to college, you're told you have to study this, pick something, and that's it.
Yeah.
And like, you don't know at that age what you want to do. So the older you get, the more you find your little niches and your little nooks and crannies of things that you really enjoy learning about.
Definitely.
And if it happens to be true crime or medical issues or just the ins and outs of the body or whatever tickles your pickle, for me, go with it. Learn about it. If you enjoy something, do it. Yeah. Just life's too bloody short. Just don't kill anyone.
No,
just
don't
murder anyone.
Right.
No.
Well,
Not today.
To lighten the mood as well, I'll give everyone a laugh, and I'll tell everyone my firebug story. So this is my little bit of arson, how we say. So when I was younger, well, not too young, I was probably about 11 or 12. I used to be obsessed with fire, like making fire and things. And I come up with this brilliant idea because my parents went to work, and I was like saying I was off for the day by myself. I was like, I'm going to make water set on fire. Now, how would you think you could do that? So I locked myself in the bathroom, shut the bathroom door, filled the sink full of water, and got 2 cans of deodorant.
Oh, you fucking
and sprayed them directly into the water because me thinking deodorant's flammable, it'll put a film of deodorant, like whatever like is flammable on the water so I can set it on fire. I thought that would be the best thing ever. Not realizing when you're spraying deodorant into water, it just makes it instantly turn into gas, filling the room full of gas. So as soon as I lit the lighter, the room exploded, firing me out of the room. Setting fire to me hair, setting fire to me eyelashes, and setting fire to me eyebrows. So before my parents got in, I had a discard of a dressing gown that had been like singed to bits. Just I had to shave my head, shave my eyebrows off, and actually cut my eyelashes to take away all the signs that there's been this fire. But yes, so that was my firebug story there.
What did you tell them had happened though?
I to this day, they do not know. I just said I got bored.
And the
I got bored with the razor.
So you're lucky.
So, yes.
My God, you little fire starter!
But I could have died because I actually got blown out. So I literally flew about 12 feet out. Knocked the door.
God.
Oh my God.
But yeah, so that was my firebug story.
Oh, right. Well,
it's always the quiet ones.
Yeah.
It's always the quiet ones,
isn't it?
Oh, I was never quiet when I was younger. Trust us, that was. Sam can attest to that. I'm quieter now than I am, but it's when I was younger in college, I was the gobby one. But yes, so that might be if I played with fire a bit more, my story might have went differently.
In hell.
What about you, Grant? Have you got anything to finish with?
Can you top that one, Grant?
No, mate, I don't think I can. I mean, we've just turned around and said 11 and 12-year-olds know the difference between right and wrong. And
then Paul Ganson tells that story.
There's a few things we've said on this episode, mate. Where
To be fair, though, I wasn't planning on killing anyone. I just wanted to set fire to water. That wasn't wrong. I was just
scientific experiments.
Yes.
Yeah.
No.
Jeffrey
didn't
Dahmer
show that
said
one on
as
Blue
well.
Peter.
He's just experimenting.
But everyone's got a stupid fire story that they've done.
Oh, I nearly set my whole house on fire by setting a piece of paper, thinking I could do it from the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that didn't work out because it went in the middle, it went round, and if I didn't catch the corner and chuck it into the sink, it would have hit me mum's curtain and the whole house would have went up. It was so quick.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I never touched fire again after that. I'm fucking terrified of it.
But yes, so that has been our true crime part 2. So I think we've done quite well. Like I say, we hit on a lot of the points. Like I say, I'm quite happy that we
Different points.
didn't glorify any killers as well. That's all the
Fuck
thing as
them.
well.
They don't get glory on this
No.
podcast.
But you do, like, you find that a lot, like, say, with the stories that get told, like, I'd say they always get shown in some kind of spectacular light. But again, just to say, like, it is the victim stories that should be told and more interestingly
100%.
to be remembered as well. I think that was always the important message to give.
100%. I think the first time when we did it, it was just on the back of Dharma coming out or already out or something like that. So there was a very different conversation as to what we've had today.
Yeah, I think someone on Facebook was making custom Jeffrey Dahmer pops.
Fuck them. Fuck them.
No.
Yeah. No, that is not okay.
I did watch an episode or two, but then I just couldn't because it just
I watched it.
It was just American Horror Story. Evan Peters is a fantastic actor.
Yeah.
But it was basically like a series of American Horror Story. It's just like
it had an ending. That's the only difference. American Horror Story ended the shit.
My biggest problem with it was the casting of Evan Peters. I mean, he's such a pin-up to so many women. You then are, to a degree, without even probably knowing it, glorifying Dharma through putting someone of Evan's looks persona, whatever.
Zac Efron and when he played Bundy as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And David Tennant with
Nielsen.
Again with Dharma, because his victims, some of them were sex workers again, and some of them were people of color.
Children.
So like,
some of them were children.
Kids. Like actual kids. So the police.
The last one was a child.
Didn't want to know. Didn't care. Just
he's a piece of shit.
Horrible. And.
But yes. But thank you guys.
Thank you guys. Can I just say a massive, massive apology for the cough, and anyone who's listening to this on audio. I am so sorry.
Sorry, I'll cut you out. It's fine.
I don't know if you can.
You've been on mute the whole time, but yeah.
Oh my god.
But thank you guys for coming on. I know, like say, when we always have a large one, it's always hard to negotiate, but I think everyone handled it really well tonight, so thank you guys for doing that. Has anyone got anything you want to promote? I know Dan, you'll probably have a new something coming up soon.
Just we're at Telford, Wales Comic-Con, Telford Takeover, 13th, 14th. Then we're at HorrorCon Sheffield the weekend after. And then where are we the weekend after that?
Oh, we're in Newcastle.
Yes.
So
I'm there all weekend working. Woo.
So we shall be seeing you and yours there at the end of next month.
And we will definitely.
I will be bringing the pork pies as well for the Saturday. So yay!
I love pork pies.
What about you?
Well, you're gonna love it because it's my dad's.
What about you, Sarah? Have you got anything to promote?
I think my next one's top 5 British comedies.
Yes, so that's in a few
which I am still working on.
Yes, so
when's that?
7th of May, that one.
Yeah,
I've got time.
What about you, Lauren? Anything to promote?
I don't know what my next one is.
I was just saying, have you got anything to promote? Because I know you do another podcast with the Birmingham lot from time to time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you can sometimes find me guesting on Geeky Brummy. That is Geeky Brummy. Yeah, I will drop you a link at some point.
Certainly.
I can't remember my next episode for that, but we always do a special roundabout free comic book day, and I'm normally guesting on that, welcoming all the fans to free comic book day.
Cool.
So
I know we are looking to do a special episode for the comic book day to do Comic Up North as well, so we'll probably talk about, like, say, comics and what we got in. I know we've done it in the past, but that'll be interesting to do another spin-off there, just another fucking spin-off.
I can talk about comics all day, so anytime.
I know Grant's always got something up his sleeve.
Got no sleeves on today, mate. No, to echo Dan, me and Wallace are at SunnyCon as well. Doing her body horror inspired artwork, and that kind of stuff.
I tried to tell Lee about it on Monday, and I completely did your wife's business disjustice. I could not explain it properly. That is such a brilliant word of saying. There you go, Lee. That's what it's called.
Yeah. Also, I've finally edited down some of the footage from mine and Jacob's little trip away. So the full kind of abridged, but best bits, shall we say? Because most of those broadcasts was just the wind going. So I've got the bits that are actually somewhat entertaining. Anybody wants to hear me ranting on about how much I don't like pheasants, you can tune in
Yes.
and watch
Oh,
that.
I
and
do.
the coffee man that deserves an award.
Oh, thank you for watching. Yes, the coffee man.
I watched quite a few
Coffee
of them.
man's cock for a cup of tea. I really would have. Well, I couldn't see who was watching, so thank you very much for watching. And I don't know what my next episode of the podcast is. I'd forgotten about the fact I was on this one because you know what I'm like. I think it might be Futurama.
No,
or maybe
you and Lauren are actually
5K.
not next week, the week after. You're back for the Star Wars talk.
Star Wars.
Yeah, you said you wanted to come on with Star Wars.
What the fuck did I say I wanted to come on with Star Wars for? I don't fuck all about Star Wars.
Oh well,
that's gonna be an interesting chat.
Actually, fuck it. Your name's down, so you're gonna have to watch all of Star Wars now.
Bring it on, man! I can do 2 hours of anything.
Yes.
You just fucking. That's so funny.
That's the 30th of April. Next week we are doing. It's going to be a fucking wild one next week. I'll be honest. We're doing Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but we've got Kelly and Graham and Sonia on. So we're Kelly and fucking Graham on.
Oh god, this is where the universe collides on itself.
So you just have to have a drinking competition when you're watching. How many times Kelly can say the word "fuck" in one sentence?
Yeah.
So
don't do it.
She's an absolute master.
Don't do it.
I am actually recording the last episode of this season's of Game of Thrones. We're going to be doing something with Lee, a quiz with Lee, and we're going to try and talk about Daenerys but that is coming to an end.
Oh.
And then I start my new project in May.
Well, not
Just wait until when George R. ever releases the next book.
It's not
If he does, it's going to be a party.
Yeah.
I mean, not to derail the podcast, but my opinion is he's probably going to pop his clogs and they're just going to make Brandon Sanderson go for it, like he did with Wheel of Time.
Just finish it. But yes, after the Game of Thrones thing, I know Sam and a coven of ladies, shall we say.
No, with the Monster Squad.
I think Dan and Peaches are going to be the first episode of The Monsters Up North, talking about the creature of the Black Lagoon. So
Never heard of it.
No.
Never heard of it.
Oh, you're great.
Yeah.
So yes, Goodwill and Graham will be back on this Friday to discuss the final episode of Picard as well. And I jumped on with them on last Friday and I had such a good time. But honestly, like even if you're not a big Star Trek fan, watch this season of Picard. It has been one of the best TV shows I have ever seen. Fact, I've been unbelievable.
Good things.
But yes, so
I want to watch it because I want to go back and watch their podcast because I watched one episode and I was like, I haven't got a clue. I don't know.
But that's the joys of it. But yes, so please follow us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, everything, TikTok with Sammy, which he does. Keep an eye on the Facebook page. Grant does some weird videos, and check out our videos from Nerdfest. Like I say, follow Dan on Bleeding Marvelous. Like I say, her website is amazing. Like I say, I bought a cool Trick or Trick Sammy the other week, and
not jealous at all.
It was amazing. So it's in the little collection down there now. But yes, anything else, Sammy?
No, that's it.
Cool.
All good.
So same bat time, same bat channel.
Stay nerdy, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.